The thing that always stops people from getting better at anything is
When it comes to like performance enhancement, what are some of the things you suggested to me and maybe why?
it's actually probably the best supplement you can get your hands on for inhibiting fat storage,
Would LSD block them from being able to handle that?
to continue to lose and make the same mistake over again.
I'm ready to go.
Did you drop your new pepped mark?
Mm-hmm.
About to drop mine.
Oh, you guys got new pep?
From Jake Benson, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, shit.
I'll go steal some.
Jake's got to share some with Andrew.
Yeah.
It's emergency.
Yeah, some new pep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you guys create an image that says new pepped emergency?
Beep, 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 beep. At the bottom of the screen. What's going on, Super Brain?
A lot of traveling, a lot of fun stuff. Life's changing, kind of how we talked about off the podcast. But we also talked about how it's an integral part of, the everlasting human journey. So maybe my personal training and like my athletic endeavors are a little bit of a side dish at the moment. But there's a lot of cool stuff going on.
Hypothetically speaking, of course, if you were to help somebody with some marathon training, what are some things that might help with marathon training? Because I feel like you're an expert when it comes to the biology of the body and also some chemistry.
So the best piece of advice I can give anyone when they start to dissect a sport is start with subtraction. So look at like what's the ideal human organism you can envision for the sport, and then subtract the things that you do and don't have related to that organism. And the reason I say that is because you almost never end up with what you think you're going to end up. So like, well, maybe you're going to get jacked. You're like, well, the first thing I need to do is obviously get jackter, and then I'll just go from there, Or maybe I need to just get faster, and I'll just keep getting faster and faster and faster. And that's just not how biology works. They're like these kind of Tetris block like compounding adaptations you make, and 1 + 1 tends to equal 3 a lot more times in biology than it tends to equal 2, if you will. So when it comes to marathon running, the first thing I would talk about is your running economy and pace. What is actually feasible for you to complete the task, and then that will end up giving you a lot of other answers. So let's say you notice like maybe you're kind of a euphoric hothead guy, and around mile 10 you're like, oh my god, this is amazing. And all of a sudden you're running 1 minute faster than you thought. Suddenly then maybe an hour or so later you gas out, you don't finish what you intended to do, and you sit down and you look at yourself like a failure, and I need to do all these maybe supplemental tricks to avoid that failure, when in reality you just didn't approach it correctly. So I think when it comes to marathon running specifically, it's inhibiting failure, not driving success from like a philosophy standpoint.
That makes a lot of sense. I know you work with a lot of different sports and stuff like that. And some sports, they're just like on their feet for a long time. So a sport like golf or something like that, someone's on their feet for a long time. How do you equate for that? Because a lot of times when we're talking about sports, we're talking about like contact sports, we're talking about like football or MMA. A lot of times we're talking about things like that. But how do you equate for, a sport like golf where somebody might be on their feet for 4 or 5 hours?
We got to look at things that have to do with what you need to do to play the golf. Like, let's say we're talking about a golfer, and how can you keep that going with this weird walk in the middle? So it's funny in golf, if you hit a short shot, you're actually only walking a short distance. But if you hit a long shot, maybe it's a par 5, now you're walking a couple hundred yards just to get to the next shot. And then you do this over 3 or 4 days. This past week I was at a golf tournament helping some people out. I was averaging over the course of 7 days, 26,000 steps.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I'm doing a couple more steps than the golfer because I work with a couple guys, so I'm running here and there and seeing people, but it's almost a totally different sport when you look at it that way versus someone who's at their home course on a golf cart swinging. So we have to first, before we even talk about golf, we have to talk about like things like your feet and your ribs and your neck, and if they're even ready to participate in sport for that long. So we see a lot of guys in golf who, when they practice, they have these amazing numbers, they hit the perfect shot, but it's like, can you do that in the heat with 20,000 steps? And all this respiration stuff comes into play too, as we've talked about like nasal breathing versus mouth breathing in the past. There's a tool for every job. You actually need quite a few tools in your toolbox to play golf or even marathon running. I kind of delineate between fine motor skill sports and gross motor skill sports. It's like the first tree I make in my umbrella, and like grappling too. It's when it's fine motor skill, you actually need far bigger of a capacity to participate than if it's gross. You can get away in a sport like football or baseball being ever so slightly deconditioned, second, because you have like that one or two explosive moments and you can catch some air. You can, maybe if in football you get replaced for a couple plays, maybe it's baseball, you were up to bat last inning, but you don't have to bat again for 2 or 3 innings, depending on how things go. So understanding that a lot of fine motor skill sports like golf and marathon running involve a lot of other stuff is actually the best way to bolster your performance.
You know, we're going to go back and forth between quite a few things, but when it does come to running, right, we've talked to a few people that are runners on the podcast, and they don't really care about the way they breathe. They don't care if it's nasal. They don't care if it's through the mouth. And I know we've talked about nasal breathing before, but just so that some people can understand, what would you have people pay attention to when it comes to their breathing, nasal versus mouth?
So they're both useful tools. And the thing you need to understand to kind of decode this, because I've seen on social media recently, you guys know I'm not huge into it, but I see all the time people are saying, you have to do this, you have to do that, this is bad, this is wrong, so on and so forth. That's not the case. The body's always going to do its best to prioritize oxygen saturation. So whether you nasal breathe or mouth breathe, you can still attain those two goals. That's the first thing you need to keep in mind. But we're getting to there in a different mechanism. When you nasal breathe, we're biasing elasticity of your vessels to kind of open up and to get more oxygen utilization from the blood, because you're actually taking in less, obviously. It's a smaller breath. Whereas if you're mouth breathing, those vessels aren't opening up to the same degree, but you're taking in a lot more oxygen. So it's almost like selecting, are we looking for efficiency or a quick change? And then that's just right now, but we can also talk about training adaptation. So maybe if you're a marathon runner, your shorter runs should maybe be nasal breathing based, so you can train that blood vessel change. And maybe you're doing one of your longer distance runs, you should probably incorporate a good amount of mouth cyclic breathing that goes with your cadence. So if you're running fast, you should have a faster breathing cadence. You're running slow, you should have a slower breathing cadence.
And when you talk about that cadence, do you mean like, is that what you like?
Exactly. So maybe like, let's say we're sprinting, it's going to be, I'm sorry if that was too
you're
loud,
good.
but
No, you're fine.
it's going to be very, very quick and rhythmic like that. And you're timing that exhale with the forceful ground contact time of your foot. But let's say now you're running a marathon, you're halfway through, second, third, maybe one of your slower pace miles. It might just be a couple of steps actually per breath. So it might be, and in that time, based on your speed and cadence, you might have gotten in 3 to 6 steps.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I found that the breathing and just being able to calm myself down to be really important. And then also something that people might want to note is that I think that sometimes it's not a bad idea to like force things here and there just so you can kind of make progress and so you can get used to certain things. However, what I've learned through the process of working on nasal breathing, if it's too forced, you end up over breathing anyway. So it just happens to be through your nose rather than through your mouth. It's harder to overbreathe through your nose. Well, somebody might even say it's kind of like impossible, but if you start to try to like open up the nasal passages more and you use like nasal strips or you pinch your nose and you are able to take in more air, I don't think that's the point of nasal breathing. I think the point of nasal breathing is to try to put a little bit of a governor on your training and to allow you to train in maybe a different heart rate zone and so forth.
Pretty much bang on, yeah. So like, for example, it's not just heart rate that matters, it's also blood pressure. So if you've ever done something and like you feel like your heart's pounding, but you took the number and it was only like 86, it's not, you don't have sensations for your heart rate. People love to think that they can just breathe their heart rate down, and it's indirect that you can do that, but it's not automatic. You don't just get to do that. So most sensations that have to do with your heart pounding are actually blood pressure. So we could realistically say that you're actually getting more blood pressure like adaptations through that nasal breathing. And now if you can run with the same heart rate but a slightly lower blood pressure or maybe a slightly higher blood pressure, you can manage that through running.
Now,
Or through breathing and running, rather.
Yeah, I'm curious about this. Do you care, because we talk about sleep all the time. We actually just talked about it with Jake and Joe. But with the amount of professional athletes you work with, do you care if they're snoring or breathing through their mouth when they sleep? Is that something that you try to have them do, or how do you deal with that?
I actually have it as a criterion marker. If you snore just because of positioning, maybe you just pass out in a weird spot. I don't hate it. But if you're snoring because your anterior neck or maybe some of the nerves in your face are so tight that you can't have actual mechanics and locomotion like properties of your mouth, jaw, neck, lungs, then I have a problem with that.
Okay. And how do you have them, like, how do you have people work on that or fix that?
So really simple. You can just release these anterior neck muscles, your sternocleidomastoid. A lot of times I'll do supra-occipital and trochlear nerve releases of the eyes and near the scalp, and that takes care of all that for them.
Okay.
Yeah, and you were showing me some of that stuff, just basically putting pressure kind of around the eyebrows, pressure around the neck, and you can actually like grab some of these like cords around the neck, and you can kind of pull on them a little bit. You can get a ton of relief, especially for people that are. I think people are a lot tighter in some of these areas than they might think, and when they first do like a little massage therapy on there, I think they'll be shocked at the results they'll get.
Yeah, so I don't even, for example, when I work with the golfers, a lot of times I'm with them all day. Like we'll start at 7:30 in the morning. We'll do a little priming session for their brain and nervous system. They go out and play. We do some restoration work and then put them to bed at night. You know, just like a little baby. I do these little rib releases, face releases and stuff, take their heart and oxygen rates before and after. Now I've seen people's heart rates drop like 14 beats in like 2 to 4 minutes of just doing this stuff. And then boom, they pass out and go to sleep.
Damn. What are some things to think about when you think about a sport like golf? Like, what are some? Obviously, it's going to be individual, you know, depending on. But are these guys like lifting heavy? Like, what are some of the protocols?
So the thing about a fine motor skill sport is like realistically, if you love to do something, it's hard to tell someone it's making them worse. I don't have any guys that lift really heavy and do that type of stuff. We might do a lot of high force med ball throws, maybe some jumps, but you got to realize in a fine motor skill sport, just like marathon running and MMA and grappling and anything like that, there's so much individual difference that goes into how you play your game that really is going to dictate what you do in the gym. So I have an athlete who's incredibly powerful, but his swing is very rhythmic, very cadence based. So we do all rhythm, cadence, metronome style work in the gym that is almost more dance-like in nature than weightlifting in nature, because I literally don't care if it's a 5-pound or 50-pound dumbbell, but we have an exact metronome with certain eccentric, concentric speeds across the set we're looking to hit. Where I have another golfer who could benefit from some more strength. So he's going to be doing stuff that's a lot more strength-oriented in the gym. So whenever it's like these fine motor skill sports, it's like, well, maybe in grappling, are you someone who's just going to squeeze the shit out of this guy and really like knock him out that way? Or are you going to wait for that one moment where he's going to make a mistake, snap on him, and honestly waste minimal energy getting a takedown or getting a tap out?
You know, you are someone who looks at things from a lot of new angles and different angles because you do a lot of reading, you do a lot of figuring things out. Is there anything that you see within like maybe the coaches or the people that are working within golf that are maybe somewhat archaic and useless but are common practice?
100%. It's the one-size-fits-all approach that's really the big thing in golf. So the question I get asked from other coaches involved all the time is like, you're doing rotational stuff, right? You know, and it's, well, I mean, yeah, sort of, but isn't everybody like, you know, you're a rotational human being. We're not just doing rotational stuff because it's golf. Like if you're marathon running, you should be doing rotational work. You should also be doing sagittal plane work. You know, we're human beings. You should train to a degree everything. But a lot of times people have this one-size-fits-all approach, and this is across pro sports as well, as your name and who you are also dictates your training. It's like, oh, you're so-and-so. They don't need to do this stuff. You know, and that's absolutely the biggest detriment to coaching in all pro sports I've seen, which is different. It's ironic, you know, when you coach general population, intermediate level athletes, maybe sports that just don't get paid to be professional, you tend to see a lot more individualization because it's begetted by that style of coaching. You can't get any further without individualization. But you see some of these professional athletes in any sports who are some of the most talented humans on the planet at what they're doing, they can get away with like, you know, doing almost nothing sometimes and get some results. Maybe not optimal. In fact, certainly not optimal, but they won't turn to sedentary at the same rate we might over here. You know, so that ends up being the safeguard for them, and they're good enough at their sport. They've been doing it for long enough. They get by, and then that coach ends up getting paid for doing essentially nothing.
How do you get people to buy in? You know, when you start talking to a client, obviously they're probably recommended from somebody else, so there's probably already a little bit of a buy-in, but how do you get them to buy in on concepts that are foreign to them? Like, hey, you know, we're going to have you take your shoes off and we're going to work on your feet. That's like weird. And then you just like rub my ribs. Like, come on, bro. Like, hook me up with some steroids or something.
I always start with talking. So I won't charge any professional athlete $1 until we've talked every 3 days for at least a month. I was like, if you can't introspect to this degree, answer the questions I'm looking to ask you, and then do the little homeworks I want you to do, it's just never going to work out. And it's funny because I am lucky. I work with a management group who is a close friend of mine. So we always have like referrals in between us that end up helping out a ton. Like you said, I'm also not big on social media. So word of mouth is how I work. So that does help me a lot with buy-in, but it's just conversations, you know, it sounds kind of cliche, but it's communication, relationships, just like anything else. You don't waltz into like a business executive's office and like slap down a contractor. Like, this is what I want, 3%. You know, that's just not how the world works.
Mm-hmm. You know, what you mentioned about the homework thing is kind of interesting because sometimes when an athlete works with somebody, they expect that coach, like, you're doing all the work for me. Like, I need you to just give me the things that, like, the easy things I need to do. But it seems like you're making your athletes truly work and change their habits. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the low-hanging fruit as far as lifestyle habits that you've seen have some of the biggest change on what these athletes do and how they perform?
I got two things rush to mind. One is just lack of consistency. A lot of times, because they're all professional athletes, obviously have elite level mindfulness, whether they know it or not. And maybe whether they express it or not, you'll see it in their sport practice. They're like, oh, this felt wrong. I got to go back and do this. And you can watch a video and you're like, dude, that looked fine. I can't tell. So their mindfulness sometimes, that's so sport specific, it actually leads to poor decisions in their life where they just won't eat breakfast because I woke up feeling good today and I'm just going to go practice. And it's like, well, that's kind of a major issue because it's 11 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. You know, that's probably one of the low hanging fruit. The other one is ironically the complete opposite in a lot of ends is lack of variability. A lot of times professional athletes get so caught up in this is how I got here, so this is what I'll continue to do. And it's like, well, realistically, you're just not the same human you were 6 years ago. So these are no longer serving you. And those two pieces of low-hanging fruit are how I got into that question and homework type deal. Because it's like, well, first, you're going to get results just by changing these things. And I shouldn't charge you for that because I'm just asking you some questions. And if you get better because we had a phone call, good for you, bro. You don't owe me any money. Yeah. But when you answer those questions and look within yourself and do these little things, you start to realize things. So it's funny, Mark said rubbing the ribs. The other day, I had this athlete come up to me who I've been working with for barely any time, like 3 months. He's like, Andy, I can't believe that I can feel when I need a rib tack now. He's like, it feels unbelievable. He's like, it doesn't feel bad when my ribs are out of line, but I have an appreciation for when they're in line now. And it was one of these things where it's such a small nuance. But
can you explain a rib tack, by the way? And sorry,
yeah, no. But it was just such a small nuance, but we approached it in a manner where I was like, hey, do you feel like kind of out of whack? It's like 7 p.m. You're still really hyped up. You still feel like you're in your golf swing. Do you feel like you're stuck? He's like, yeah, I do feel like I'm stuck. I'm like, well, let's take your heart rate. Let's do this rib drill. We'll chat for another 45 seconds and take it again. You tell me how you feel. And it was the same thing. He's like, wow, the heart rate did go down. He's like, actually, you know, I do feel more relaxed. And all of a sudden, after 2 weeks, it's like, wow, I didn't sleep as well those 2 nights when I didn't do those rib drills. And then it just becomes a thing where now he looks for it, you know? And I'm not trying to get people to eat out of my hands, but when I'm doing a funky little rib technique, you know, if you're not even aware of what could change, you're going to think it's useless, right? So a rib tack comes from the Czech Republic, late 90s. Pretty small research group, actually, but it's probably the most profound manual therapy technique I've discovered in my career. So essentially, we're just applying some light manual force to the ribs, and it's a manual reset for your diaphragm. So essentially, you know, tightness in all muscles is length tension relationships is what we call them. So maybe if like I couldn't get my arm out all the way, I'd have what's called a length tension relationship between my bicep and tricep. This is probably too tight. This is probably not tight enough to straighten it out. Boom, boom, boom. You know, we've seen like the Vladimir Yanda thing. I don't know if you guys remember that name, but it's like that upper lower cross syndrome. Like you see the anterior pelvic tilt, weak hamstrings, tight hip flexors. That's what this concept comes from. Vladimir Yanda from Russia was the guy, or one of those countries, that coined this concept in anatomy and physiology. So when we see these length tension changes in the ribs and diaphragm, what we end up seeing is that the primary impact is on the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is probably the longest nerve in your body. It controls blood flow to your heart, lungs, and stomach. And I started to realize, well, not only is that happening, it's also your ribs are obviously connected to your hips and shoulders. So now I can change all these little things at once. And then over the years, it grew into now it's part of my assessment process. So it's like, you think you have a shoulder mobility issue? Maybe. Maybe it's a breathing and rib cage issue. So I'll measure your shoulder mobility. I'll do some rib and breathing techniques and then remeasure it. And then find out if you actually have a problem problem, or you just couldn't get into that position because you didn't have enough air, your collarbone didn't move, and then your brain thought it was unsafe.
Do you know, have you heard of RPR or reflex performance reset?
Yep, huge.
Is it some of like the same type of concepts where they're like,
Anatomy region wise, yes. We're not using the same mechanism though.
Okay.
So theirs is more on the excitement. You know, they always talk about the excitation, especially in the sternum one.
Yeah.
There's a little more on the excitement part of things. Doesn't mean it can't be relaxing, but through agitation of the muscle, that's how they attain a Golgi tendon organ response. GTOs for short are essentially the managers and supervisors for a lot of these length tension relationships. So they're approaching just that in a different mechanism than I am, but the validity to the ribs and all that stuff is still 100% there.
okay.
It seems like a lot of the things you suggest are like on par with things that like regular people should be doing here and there as well, right? Like just to like stress mitigators, ways to deal with everyday life. So what are some reasons why, you know, just somebody listening to this should maybe practice some of the things that you're mentioning that maybe some of your pro athletes are doing?
It's funny. I want to start off with the joke. I always make the joke like the only difference between a pro athlete and a regular person is their sensory motor cortex. Yeah, sure. It's like the nerdiest joke ever. But it's like the
Sensory motor cortex gets them every time.
Every time.
But it's like they just have
You
a
got to
skill.
practice the delivery a little bit more.
Yeah, is that what it is?
The timing, yeah.
Oops. Well, emphasis on the nerd portion then, right? But like they just have a skill they're nasty at, and that's it. You know what I mean? Not like that's it. Like it's not difficult, but like at the end of the day, like they still use oxygen and calcium and like all this stuff the same way we do. So the difference is maybe they're excellent at something very specific, and maybe it's a physical sport. But that doesn't mean that if they have a high heart rate to start their sport practice, that they're not going to be kind of screwed. You know what I mean? You can be the best ex-athlete in the world, but if your resting heart rate to start practice is 104, guess who's not going to make it through practice? It's just impossible, you know? So I think the same concept of low-hanging fruit that I mentioned with having an actual routine and also understanding there's a need for variability within yourself when you look into introspection as well as your schedule, those are the low-hanging pieces of fruit. So all the time people are like, I want to lose fat, right? Well, the first thing to lose fat is actually not losing fat. The first thing to losing fat is inhibiting the storage of fat. Then you can lose body fat. Because let's say you just took like, we'll do something extreme, right? Let's say you took like 700 mgs of caffeine, some clenbuterol, and thyroid, right? Like, you know, the most extreme thing you could think of. All that fatty acids that you liberated into your blood will, by the end of the day, be restored into the adipocyte. Whereas if you inhibit fat storage through whatever mechanism, this is typically coming from parasympathetic responses to the liver, then you can have a lot more fat in your blood, but you're going to block it from returning to adipocytes. And that's the difference between fat loss and, I hate all these terms, like fat burning, you know? When we talk about the liver going through beta oxidation, you cleave a very specific carbon portion of a fatty chain, and it can go through the Krebs cycle and all that crap to get ATP. That doesn't have to mean that that fat's gone forever. So let's say you took a fat molecule and you did it to that, and end of the day comes and these adipocytes were drained, they could still call into room service and get a new fat cell come in, or a new fat molecule come in, and then refill that cell, right? So when we're really talking about fat loss, it's can you stop the failure aspect of what's going to get in the way before you hit the gas and try to make a big change?
Yeah.
What are some of those failures?
In fat loss?
Yeah.
So it's the inhibition of fat storage is like the term I like to use, is essentially what we just said. And the reason that's the biggest failure is because everyone starts out too hot. So we actually learn about the inhibition of fat storage through looking at growth hormone research. It's actually probably the best supplement you can get your hands on for inhibiting fat storage.
Growth hormone?
Yeah. That doesn't mean it's going to increase fat loss, but it's the same bank account concept. Did you spend more money or did you just save more money? You know, all these small nuanced differences that add up to the same number.
Yeah.
So fat storage is going to be inhibited by having low resting heart rates when you need to recycle energy. So let's say you leave the gym and 3 hours later you check your heart rate and your oxygen rates with a pulse oximeter. It's like $20 on Amazon, and you see numbers that are similar to what they were in the gym. you're not going to be able to inhibit fat storage because we've had such a high energy expenditure for so long that the only way to make it safe again to your hypothalamus is to restore all the things, or at least most of the things that you liberated during your intense exercise. So that's why it's such an easy little thing to harp on, to talk about your resting heart rate and stuff like that, because it's less than $20 to measure. It's probably even free if you have an iPhone, and you're actually going to get a lot out of it.
So, because we've talked about this before, but we're probably going to get into certain supplementation that can help with this. But what are some practices that people should try to, again, low-hanging fruit, to have a lower resting heart rate on a daily basis?
Practicing meditation is easily the biggest one. And understand that meditation is an umbrella term. Like, it's not just like sitting like a monk in like an orange jumpsuit and like going om. Yeah. It can be that if you want it. But meditation can be anywhere from a moving thing to something that's like a float tank when like you're almost asleep, and really everywhere in between. So practicing some acute mindfulness, meaning that you're not just mindful because you're happy, you're doing a skill that forces that to be triggered, is one of the easiest ways to make that change to your resting heart rate. Because most people, we just live in such a stimulatory society. Everything that you see on social media praises more money, faster, higher heart rate, more caffeine, get more work done. But no one talks about, well, it's like, how are you going to recover from these things? How are you going to be able to try to do this for 7 days? You'll never be able to do enough work in one day that justifies not being responsible for 7.
That makes a lot of sense. When it comes to like performance enhancement, you and I have been going back and forth a little bit on some of my marathon training. So I think it'd be great to share with some of the people, some of the things that we've talked about. What are some of the things, if you don't mind sharing, what are some of the things you suggested to me, and maybe why?
So, I guess I'll start with, I definitely pegged you as a guy. It's going to be like too excited.
Oh, yeah.
That would probably be your failure. It's not going to be that you didn't do the training, not going to be that you didn't learn enough about your running cadence and economy. It's not going to be motivation. It's just going to be, when we originally got on the call with Dan, I pictured, how is Mark going to potentially screw this up? And I pictured Mark at mile 19 with his eyes like this big. Oh my God, this is the best. You know what I mean? Like, I'm having a blast. And then all of a sudden it gets to like mile 24. He's like, oh no. Like, that's what I pictured going wrong potentially. So the first thing I looked at was telmisartan, because we also talked about a little bit of that water retention on the longer runs. That happens. It's happened to Joe before with his world records. When you have an extreme expenditure, like, obviously the only thing being expended is not just like glucose and sugar and fats and all this stuff, ions. There's water attached to it. In fact, it's going to be a lot of water liberated. That water needs to be moderated and managed so it doesn't end up in your hands and you look like Mickey Mouse. And the kidneys are obviously the job, or the employers for the job. When it comes to managing water, telmisartan's great in that scenario because you can take it before bed. It's going to enhance what we call like the PPAR receptor family, which I'll talk about in a second. But it's going to do that as a perk in relation to the kidney changes it can give you. So then Mark can, quote unquote, train his kidneys at night, continue to do these meditation moonlight things that trigger that heart rate to be a little bit lower. And then when he goes to do his runs, his kidneys are actually making adaptations along the way outside of running to manage water better while he runs. Kind of a crazy concept, but people think training is only going to the gym. You can train all day. Doesn't mean it'll be like high heart rate training, but you train your ability to bring your heart rate down after something exciting. You train your gut to digest more carbs so you can ultimately build more muscle eventually. People like have certain areas where they accept that it's training. Let's say you want to build muscle for the first time. You're going to have protein farts for a little bit, but then you'll develop more pepsin and pepsinogen and you'll be fine later on, right? And people are aware of that training, but they don't understand the concept of training other things. So the telmisartan was a huge one. LSD is a huge one for marathon running. I've used it successfully in many, many people doing, whether it's trail running, mentorships, people that train trail runners, marathons, Ironmans, triathlons.
Do you think it's pretty common, even aside from your recommendation? Do you think it's pretty rampant?
I would say if you didn't take it, you'd be in the 50% or less half that isn't taking it in running.
Wow. Really?
1,000,000%.
Wow.
Especially trail running. If you go to trail running, you'll literally be the only guy there not dosed Nsima, I promise.
So yeah, what is the thing with LSD and like running?
The massive thing is that, so obviously, and maybe not obvious, this is obvious to me, you have a fatty acid in your blood, right? It's not just going to be like boom, boom, done, right? There are intermediaries along everything along the way. So a fatty acid is kind of like this pen. It's maybe too big to do anything at the moment. And beta oxidation, the cleaving of that first carbon, is just the cost of admission. It's just getting you into the concert. You don't get to the drinks yet. You don't get to like the special seating, just the cost of admission. We have other PK proteins, protein kinases, and they have A, B, C subunits and all this stuff that are going to trim it in like different areas and shapes and sizes. So that it has different, like, not half-life isn't the right word, but period of time to be used in your blood, if you will. So protein kinase C and protein kinase A are the ones we're talking about with acid. Protein kinase C is going to make the fatty acid cleaved in a manner where there's going to be a longer time for it to turn into ATP. It's essentially going to make it like cutting in half. And now when we talk about protein kinase A, it's going to cut it in half in the exact opposite manner. And now you're going to have a faster usage of fatty acids acutely. We have all these protein kinases in natural ratios. When you take even as little as 20 micrograms of LSD, you are automatically going to favor protein kinase A. The cool thing is it's actually going to do this in a relatively non-cardiac stimulatory environment. And off the top of my head, it's probably the only compound I can think of that does that combination. So you add that plus a little bit of euphoria, and it's pretty much the perfect long-distance running drug.
Question about that. Is there any drawbacks to like maybe an individual's ability to feel pain, or if something goes wrong while they're running, would LSD block them from being able to handle that? Because you already have all the endorphins from running for long distances. On top of that, LSD, could that lead to even worse injury?
It could, especially if you take, so user error is always the issue here.
Yeah.
Like people think it's like, oh, I need to be tripping balls for this to work. It's like, it's actually the exact opposite. This protein kinase effect happens at what are called like sub-therapeutic doses.
Okay.
So you could have it in your system and not even know it's technically happening to get the effect you want for it. But let's say maybe you're a little bit soft and you're not Mark Bell and you're like, oh, my feet hurt, like, and they're going to hurt. Like you signed up for this, like no one said like your shoulders and low back were going to feel good lifting heavy. Like it's the same concept, right? So there is potential for danger there, but that's the same potential with all sports. There's a compound called DADA that I'm a huge fan of. I was part of bringing it into the industry recently in the last couple of years, and it works the same way as far as like changing your work capacity in the heavy breathing world. It essentially, there we go. That's Jake's company. Diisopropylamine dichloroacetate. So what it's going to do, it's going to take essentially the brakes off your force production in your glycolytic or heavy breathing system. So it's called PDH, pyruvate dehydrogenase. By altering that, you can continue to be really strong when you're breathing really heavy. And, it sounds awesome, but then the same safety question comes up. It's like, well, what if I'm doing something dangerous and it's in the heat and all this stuff? Like, can I die? It's like, well, yeah, because we're going to stop you from being safe brain-wise by decreasing force production when you lose oxygen.
Yeah.
But it ends up being all in user error. Whenever you come to make a change in biology, you always want to start with the lowest and smallest controllable change possible, because we all know that epigenetics is how we live. That's the term for like the little protein day-to-day changes that have to do with genetics.
Yeah.
Those are going to be compounding, and they have way better hearing than any other cell, or if you will, or organ system, whatever you want to call it. These cascades that have to do with epigenetics are very sensitive, and they take really good notes. That's how we adapt over time. That's how you could do something submaximal for 4 weeks, and on the 5th week, do something supramaximal. So people just tend to be too short-sighted when they take stuff. And they're like, well, I want this all now. And then don't realize, well, if I do this for 3 consecutive days, how is that going to impact me and how is that different? So not to jump around, but whenever I mentor people, I talk about the 48-hour law. You want to look at things, and I'd say shotgun shell-like approaches, 24 to 72 hours. So if you do something in a 48-hour period, just because you went to sleep in the middle doesn't mean they're separate days, So doing something today can directly improve or negate what you're going to do tomorrow. And then you have to summate what happened over the last 2 days, not take them as days 1 through 7.
Damn. What are some of the other things you advise? There's ITTP and
inositol trispyrophosphate, ITPP. So this is actually relatively simple, even though the name sounds really crazy. We have 3 binding sites for oxygen on hemoglobin. It's essentially going to effectively bind 1 to 2, closer to 2 of them, so that now you have more free usable oxygen for muscles and for all this other stuff. So there's a priority list for everything in the body, right? So it's not like if I ate 100 grams of protein, why does that not build muscle compared to maybe 200 or 250? Because of this priority list. It's not like, oh, here's a protein shake, this is going straight to my biceps. It's like, well, did we pay off everything else
It
first?
doesn't work that way?
Unfortunately.
I don't know.
Damn.
That's for me.
I was going to say.
It looks like it's working out pretty good.
But it's just like, finances. You have priority lists. Like if you spend all your money on like, I don't know, like hookers and blow, guess who's not paying their rent this month? Like that rent has to be higher on the priority list.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with like, whether it's supplements or food or anything else. Like if you're going to make a change, like see where it is in the priority list and then think more than one day in advance.
Going back to what you were mentioning about DADA, I'm thinking of like, for example, if a grappler started using that and let's say they use a lot, but if they're used to pushing themselves within that sport, you were mentioning that's user error, but because it's not necessarily a controlled substance and they don't know how to use it correctly, could that be a situation where they maybe push themselves deep into like a heart attack or something because they don't realize how much work they're doing and they'd usually have the signals to slow down, right? Or am I totally off?
No. So it wouldn't. You'd have to really mess up to get that far.
Okay.
It's more likely that you'll run into like overheating, cramps, something like that first. Like you're not going to randomly have an MI, a myocardial infarction. That's the heart rate. Like it's you're going to run into a lot of other signs first. So that's what actually kind of makes it a little safer than LSD, because not that either of them are unsafe, to be honest. I'm not saying that everyone should take them either, because also like what's the average person going to gain from some of these things? Like if you can't run 4 miles in the first place, LSD is not the drug for you. You can't even run 4 miles, so it's that type of stuff. So you'll just run into other safety signals. And then the biggest one in sports is actually sport technique degradation. I'm giving you the opportunity to do something. I'm giving you the energy. I'm putting your brain in a position to do something. But if you start sucking, that's going to stop you way before anything else. So maybe you took like Jake's is, I believe, 200 milligrams per milliliter. Let's say you're like nuts and you do like 3 cc's, right? Which is more than you need by a long shot. But all of a sudden you started doing terrible. You wouldn't, as a logical athlete, continue down that vector, because maybe it's a grappler. You're like, man, I keep looking for this arm bar or this Kimura, but it's just not there. I got to pick something else.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too far away from it because then I'll end up forgetting to ask later. But I like where you were going with that 48-hour rule. So in the context of somebody trying to get better at jiu-jitsu, would you recommend like I went this morning, so should I go tomorrow morning or maybe later tonight or whatever it may be? And then what would the protocol be for keeping that 48-hour rule in mind?
So it's more looking at, you can only make so much change, right? So like, if you could just go to jiu-jitsu twice a day for 7 days a week and get better, obviously you would do that, but that's also not feasible either. So it's more looking at, again, like what Mark said earlier about the marathons, I'm going to start the subtraction method. Maybe it's like, look, you have awesome technique, but you just don't have enough creatine phosphate in your biceps to keep this chokehold long enough to actually submit someone. So maybe the day before you could do some creatine phosphate bicep work and then supplement with creatine, then eat a little extra protein and take, some specific amalgam of like methylfolate and P5P, which will acutely decrease homocysteine and increase how much creatine phosphate you could store in a cell. And then tomorrow, you'll be able to sustain that chokehold maybe 6 seconds longer. And then you do that over a couple of months, and you've had maybe 6 sessions where you were 6 seconds longer, and now you've made the epigenetic change to have that creatine phosphate capacity you need.
And even drugs and supplements aside, you can also look at the 48 hours as sleep, food, right? Like, how am I going to recover from this? What do you have access to? Maybe you don't want to get involved in taking a bunch of different supplements, or maybe you don't want to take the time to learn about them. Do you have access to, a shower, like a cold shower, hot shower, different types of therapy like that? That's kind of it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that's the way I've always looked at the body in terms of like dieting and all kinds of different things. I've always felt the body works on this like 2 or 3 day delayed response. What's okay? That was cool that I did that on Monday, but like, what's Wednesday and Thursday going to look like?
Yeah, one of the best caddies I work with says that he won't play golf more than one day in a row. He's like, if I have a great day, I'm taking 2 or 3 days off. I'm going to go lift weights and do something else. And he's a caddy. And it's funny because he doesn't know these things, but he's just been intuitive enough to realize that, like, I can't perform that optimally for 2 straight days doing the same exact thing. So I'm going to have this 3-day rotating schedule. And that maybe works best for him. It's funny. That's as I've mentored Jake over the years, that's how I have him approaching, based on how he naturally does things through his methods and systems and me mentoring a little bit. That's how he ends up doing a lot of his bodybuilding work, especially for females now, are mini 2 to 4 day cycles that you just run again and again and again.
So, we we're talking about this before, but when it comes to like maybe a skill acquisition stack, Andrew's trying to get better at jiu-jitsu and learn new technique. People are trying to learn new form for different movements and have things click. What would you have maybe from the supplementation side? And then, applying that skill, how can somebody go about it so they can acquire certain skills, physical skills, faster?
So I'll kind of like run you maybe like a 2 or 3 hour routine. So it's like maybe it's jujitsu, like maybe an hour before jujitsu, especially if you want to get the whole gamut, like maybe improve body comp a little bit along the way, all that stuff. I would expose yourself to a cold temperature before you eat. And I'll talk about like the stuff it does after, but I'll expose yourself to a cold temperature, then eat your meal. Then mindfully, and I don't mean, when I say the word meditate, I don't mean, again, sit there like, we're going to do a spatial drill while you meditate. So maybe you're going to see yourself hitting this Kimura. And then it's like, now I want you to see it happen really, really fast and then slow it down. And then change speeds, seeing it correctly in your spatial visualization drill. Then when we go to participate, maybe we'll go a little bit of Nupept. Maybe we can use a little bit of amoxapine, which is something I think I talked about last time, or a whole different gamut of supplements we can talk about in a second. But now you're going to have, the specific epigenetic cascade happening in the liver is called lipin-1 when you go from cold to eating and changing body temperatures and getting hot. This is going to give you the acute work capacity you need to maintain the skill. The thing that always stops people from getting better at anything is their capacity for excellence. And this is something I talked about quite in depth in my nootropics book coming out. But your capacity for excellence is what's stopping you from making skill change. So maybe we talked about Andrew's like bicep creatine phosphate thing in the chokehold before. And he's like, I have the technique, I see it in my head, but I just can't get it right for long enough. So his skill acquisition actually has to do with keeping that motor pattern in his brain that has to do with the specific chokehold hot long enough, and then actually getting it cooled after the gym. So maybe in that scenario where it's like, I know it in my head, but I can't maintain it long enough, your learning stuff might come after your sport practice. Whereas if you're just dumb as bricks and you can't figure shit out, we're going to have you take the Nupept before, So that goes along with all that stuff as well.
Interesting.
That's dope.
Okay.
How's that Nupept? Did it hit you guys yet?
Yeah, I feel it a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, when he said, like, you can see the Kimura in your head, just like an explosion of like happy feelings came over me, and I'm like imagining hitting a Kimura now. So yeah.
If I had to pick so I said meditation's that like umbrella term. There's so many little aspects of it that are still called meditation. Spatial visualization drills in the last 8 months is probably by far my new favorite tool. Just the amount of things I've been able to see change and the opportunities and doors I see open up for athletes who can start to master these skills is just outrageous. I'm learning new stuff all the time just by working, reading, and seeing stuff like actually come together in that like real world scenario. So a spatial drill, like, one of the golfers I'm working with, I have him at the tee box, and he's like a 360 degree camera, and he has to rotate around himself and see himself in 3D from every single angle at the tee box.
So he's visualizing this. You
Yes.
have him, okay.
So spatial ability, when we look at it from like the actual definition of it, it's your ability to manipulate things in your head. So like the Rubik's Cube in your head concept, right? Can you tell me how to get home, like driving through the streets in your head without you having to go there, These are tangible skills. This isn't a gift. It's funny, I work with so many pro athletes. I hear them tell me what they think their gifts are all the time. I'm like, you're wrong, bro. And I'll tell them, like, look, it's not a gift. You just worked harder than everybody most of the time.
You're 6'9". Like, I think that's where we're going to start.
Exactly. So like, the gifts I see are like people's immune system, how quickly they can learn a new skill, their ability to maintain a skill under crappy biological conditions. I believe nowadays that those are your genetic gifts, where they're not skills that you could train. If I give you glutathione and it takes you 2 days to get the immune response, I can't really do much to make it hit you in 6 hours. I have some athletes where I've seen athletes lose 6 pounds of inflammation in 1 day with the glutathione intervention. But I promise I don't have the genetics he has, but I've seen it happen. And that's the stuff where you're like, wow, it's genetics. I've had athletes drop their resting heart rate like 30 beats over the course of a month. And I remember with this athlete, it was after a surgery, and he's like, Andy, I'm just gifted in that sense. I was like, to be honest, no. I was like, you did your meditation every day. You followed it up with your nasal breathing walk. You did the proper stuff after your heavy breathing gym lifts, and you did that every day for a month. You got 28 good reps in with that. It's not genetics. You just did the work.
Power Project family, quality sleep can make everything with your health and fitness easier, which is why we've partnered with Hostage Tape. Now, we've been talking about mouth tape for years and nasal breathing for years. But one of the problems that we've had with tape is we all like to rock facial hair, and a lot of the mouth tapes we would use would fall off of our face at night. Hostage Tape doesn't fall off your face if you have a beard or if you're not a man and you don't. I'm joking. You don't need a beard, right? But either way, Hostage Tape makes sense. It'll stick to your face when you're asleep. You'll have better quality sleep because you're breathing through your nose all night long. It is a no-brainer. And if you head to hostagetape.com/powerproject, you'll be able to get the Power Project annual deal, which is a year's supply of Hostage Tape for 55 cents a day. You'll be saving $150 on the typical yearly deal. You're going to get 2 free tins and a blindfold. It's a no-brainer. So head there right now and get yourself some Hostage Tape. Links are in the description along with the podcast show notes. Shut your fucking mouth when you sleep. Enjoy the show.
With glutathione, I had a cold recently, and it lasted about a day and a half. Because I thought I was fucked. My daughter was sick. A bunch of people in the house were sick. I started getting like a weird throat thing, and I was just tons of snot and the whole thing. Pretty bad cold, and I think you might have recommended a couple other things, but I remember I took glutathione, and it could have been coincidental. I mean, I also got extra sleep and things like that, but I mean, it seemed like it blasted it right out of there for me.
By the way, and I know you're about to say something about that, but Joe said that like he, I think Jake told his parents got, and Jake told him to give his parents glutathione, and he said within a day they were over it. So what the fuck's going on with glutathione, Andy?
The reason I love it is because like it's the foundation of the immune system. If you go online and you're like, oh, I'm going to eat blueberries, and they'll tell you all this stuff about antioxidants, the miracles of antioxidants, and you're like, all right, I actually started smoking cigarettes last week. Let's see how bad this is for me. And you Google that, and it's like these free radicals are going to kill you and your parents next week. You know what I mean? Yeah. These terms, antioxidant and free radical, actually come from glutathione. So glutathione is your parent immune system, like currency, if you will. Same way different countries have different currencies. Glutathione in its reduced form is going to be like its pre-usage form. And then when it gets oxidized, it's been used. The balance of reduced to oxidized glutathione in your body is how we determine like vague immune system strength, what you're dealing with immune system stress-wise, and all that stuff. So the reason it's so effective in so many different ways is because you're giving your body the currency to pay these debts. Now, the novel thing about glutathione, which makes it different than maybe an antibiotic, is that you're going to run through the whole sickness process still. An antibiotic is blunting the process. So Mark's cold may have originally been meant to last 3 days. He went through the whole process of...
Yeah, I still have a lot of snot. Yeah. Still blowing my nose a lot, but I don't feel sick at all.
Yeah, so you might have gone through the process of getting over the inflammatory markers, the pro-inflammatory cytokines, all this crap, but you still are going to have the things that come along with it, right? Like the snot, for example. You still have to get all that snot out eventually. Maybe your body handled the little DNA things that have to do with getting sick, but you might still have this. Whereas an antibiotic is stopping your body from being able to process the inflammatory cytokine sickness-based response.
I want to go back to the visual stuff real briefly. When I was powerlifting, whenever I did my assistance exercises, whether it was the reverse hyper, the glute ham raise, the tricep push down, I'll land on the glute ham raise. For example, the glute ham raise, I would think about like where I'd get stuck in a deadlift. and I would think about like finishing that deadlift because typically I would round over like in a squat or in a deadlift, and then most of the weight would be dumped right into my hamstrings. So I would visualize that as I was doing those exercises when I would do tricep push downs or close grip work or any sort of assistance work for the bench press. I would think about where I tend to get stuck, and I would think about pushing through those ranges of motion. So I found that to be insanely helpful. And then on top of that, as that yielded some results, I started to think about, where am I competing? Like, what's the venue? What's it going to look like? Who am I kind of up against? Like, who else is going to be there? What's it going to feel like when I unrack the bar? Like, is there a big crowd? Is there a small crowd? Like, what am I dealing with? What do the lights look like? I would think about everything. I would run through every single scenario, and I would try to play that out the best I could. And that ended up being really effective for me. On another note, I heard Tiger Woods with this 3-picture idea. Have you ever heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Tiger Woods would look down at the ball, and this is something his dad taught him. You can look it up, Andrew. Maybe it'd be better, actually, if you hear the commentary from him. But anyway, I'll just briefly describe it. He looked down at the ball, and he would, kind of blink and take a picture of that. He'd look at the hole, he'd blink, take a picture of that, and he'd look back at the ball again, take a picture of that, and then he'd hit the ball. And, obviously it seemed to be something that worked out pretty well for him, that visualization.
So it's cool. I'm going to talk about 2 really world famous studies that describe the basic physiology you need to understand as to why that actually works and happens. The first has to do with the stigma of like science being awful to monkeys. And look, we haven't been great to these animals over time. But I think it was in the 50s or 60s. I got this from the Norman Doidge book, The Brain's Way of Healing. The exact story, obviously. So if you haven't heard the Norman Doidge series, The Brain That Changes Itself and the sequels, The Brain's Way of Healing, legitimately life-changing books. Like, I'll never forget, I was in college, I printed out the first one, 1 page at a time in the college printer, and everyone hated me for it. And I was walking around with a stack of single-sided pages like this, reading it. But it was free because I downloaded it illegally. Sorry, Norman. Tough times. But what they said was, so they cut off these monkeys' arms, then they had them do like, one random exercise with the other arm, then they opened up the monkey's brains, ethically, of course. And they realized that even though they had severed an arm, roughly 80% of the changes made to the other arm still happened to those neurons in the severed arm. But the important part was this is before the brain was fully adapted to not having an arm. So it's like, wow, like the concept of like, oh, I only did 7 on my right and 6 on my left, and I'm going to be asymmetrical. It's like, it's gone. Like, imagine, like, I like to play the game with people whenever they bring up an idea to me. Let's play the if it's true game. So like, run with the concept of if it's true that 1 rep on one side made a difference. Imagine how weird we would all look. Everyone stands on one leg. Like, it's funny. Like, can you wipe your ass with both hands?
Probably impossible.
I haven't tried with my left hand.
I'd probably get my watch dirty.
Yeah. We're all probably going to hurt ourselves trying.
I think I could.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But that's the first piece of information you need to understand. The body is excellent at managing symmetry when it comes to sports and the reciprocal sides of things happening. Mm-hmm. The second thing we now need to understand is that there was a really famous period of time where they were doing studies on memory. And the 2 things that mattered the most were they had people memorize cell phone numbers that were outside of your country. Because obviously, like, the metronome and rhythm, the things helps you remember. So if you give someone their number, it's like da-da-da, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. You know what I mean? Boom. Easy to remember because they're USA numbers. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden you talk to someone in Aussie and they're like, my number is +44, and they'll give you like 11 digits. And it's like, oh, okay, dude. I'll definitely call you on that number.
Oh, God, those suck. Yeah.
So we have all these things that are really important variables as to not just how we create the memory, but how the brain interprets these things, right? So now when we get back to the concept of, well, how can visualization actually help me at something? We can start to realize that your brain is anticipatory, obviously, right? The same way we know your heart's anticipatory. If you just like walked up to your 600-pound deadlift and your heart rate didn't go up a little bit before you got to the deadlift, it'd literally just explode. Like you'd be a bruise right here, right? We need these like segues
Yeah.
biologically, and everyone accepts that. But the same thing happens in the brain. The reason you can't just walk up to your PR on any lift without having some type of little routine is because you need this anticipatory action that goes along with the world around you, what you've done in the past, certain muscles that are going to help get those parts of your brain red hot so that they're ready to participate by the time you get to the bar. So maybe you're doing a tricep extension. It was like a really difficult drop set, and you went up there and you were like flexing your quads before. It probably wouldn't help the same if you were flexing your triceps, right? Same concept as Mark was saying, the rush of performing in front of a crowd often messes with people because they don't take into account the fact that their biology, their heart rate, their respiration rate is going to be higher in sports performance the day of because we have these outside variables. And then all of a sudden, what you thought was maybe doing a Kimura under a heart rate of 128 is now trying to do a Kimura with a heart rate of 158. And now we have a different scenario. The funny part about that is sometimes your athletes perform better than you'd think in bad scenarios. When I was doing my assessments for the golfers, arguably one of the best golfers on the team had the highest putting success rate with the highest heart rate on the team at the same time. I was like, oh my God, that's kind of crazy. You shouldn't have that happening. But what we start to notice then is he's actually able to perform under a higher level of norepinephrine than any other athlete on the team. So that's why his success goes up as his heart rate increases. He's able to perform under higher levels of norepinephrine than maybe other guys on the team are. So his high point of success is a different biological marker than the high point of success for someone else.
Is there a reason for that with him specifically? Like, did he, without realizing, train that aspect of himself, or is it just something that he was used to over a long period of time?
Probably a little bit of both. It definitely has to do with personality too.
Yeah.
Definitely has to do with past successes. Like this athlete had a lot of huge wins in a short period of time in his career. So it's like all of a sudden, it's like now it makes sense as to why he may have been accustomed to that because so many things happen so quickly, short periods of time, all the pressure, and then you've had success during that high pressure scenario. You create associations. If you ever tried to jerk off with sandpaper, it probably didn't go well. So you're going to go back and remember and be like, shouldn't do that again. I'm going to grab a tissue.
Yeah. Perfect.
I think what you're mentioning about success is huge because sometimes when someone's successful at something, they tend to kind of make it look easy, and sometimes it looks like nonchalant. They're like barely even care. They can like close their eyes and like hit a free throw. And I think through that that confidence that you build when you're young. I've said this before. There's some people that you can kind of see in their step, in their stride, that they never hit a home run. They were never the guy. They were always last guy picked type of thing, and that's going to shift your confidence in the other direction. And so you're going to be convinced in your head that I can't slide into that plate the way the other guy did because I don't have that capacity. But if you had success in sports and other areas, then you're like, well, I can mimic anything anybody else can do, and watch this, I'm going to do it better.
Yep. It's funny. Success and winning is such an interesting thing in pro sports. Everyone thinks it's something that you could chase. You can't chase a win until you've already won. That's what makes the first one so difficult because once you've won, you now have all these data points, all these things, and most importantly, recent memories that you can refer back to. Whereas if you've made a bunch of mistakes in a row doing something, the most recent memory you have for it is probably multiple failures.
Yeah.
So it makes it difficult. So whenever people are like, Andy, I really need to win this tournament. You haven't won yet? It's like, no, you don't. I need you to outperform yourself and manifest your best. And then if you happen to win, then afterwards we can talk about winning and how you win. But you can't talk about how to lead a horse to water if the horse has never drank the water, if the horse isn't accepting of it. So when you have an experience like failure, it might change you, but you also need to realize in a funny way how it didn't change you. So when you win, there are certain things you don't want to change, and there are certain things you do want to change, the same way with failure. So if you won for the first time and you happen to do a couple of novel things that I might look at as your coach that really contributed to the win, we now have data points that say you respond really well to this. That's why that heart rate test I did on that athlete was so important, because now I can go back to his team and say, in fact, we need to be getting his heart rate even higher in warm-ups the day of, because we know this response to norepinephrine he has. Whereas with someone else on the team, I might limit his heart rate in his warm-up to 128 because he doesn't respond better to norepinephrine as it just dose dependently goes up.
What if somebody's listening and they have a negative association to pressure? Like, let's say competition's coming up and they're trying to be positive, they're trying to feel good, but every time they're about to either get on that platform or they're either about to get on that mat and they're about to compete, it just falls through for them. What can this person do? Or like, I know there's so many things that a person like that could do, but what are the things that you think someone who's just had so many losses, what can they do to try to turn that vision of themselves around?
So it's funny, you probably won't expect this answer, but the worst thing you could do in that scenario is positive self-talk. You're setting yourself up for an expectation that is very unlikely to happen. It's colliding with your recent memories, and then you're going to get to a point where you're like, oh crap, I don't even know what to do right now.
Yeah.
When you're going through, in golf, they call it the yips. You call it a slump in baseball. It's all the same stuff. A period of recent memories that are negative, you don't want to identify with, atypical for your performance metrics, whatever. You need to accept the fact that there's a high chance it's going to happen again. You need to take it on the chin and then have strategies that you could train or not train mentally to overcome it. So for example, like let's say, every morning of a tournament, you take a massive shit and like your stomach hurts and you can't eat a lot of food and you realize to yourself that's negative and you keep anticipating it and be like, oh man, if I get this stomach ache, I'm not gonna be able to perform. And you just said that to yourself.
Yeah.
And it happens, you're screwed. But if you also say, man, I just need the stomach ache to go away and I will be able to perform well tomorrow, and then you get it, you're also screwed. So what you then need to do is accept it. There's probably a 95% chance I wake up tomorrow with the runs. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe eat something. I'm going to do this meditation, maybe expose myself to some cold temperatures and just eat it. And then maybe one day it won't happen and I'll deal with it then. But lacking acceptance is the best way to continue to lose and make the same mistake over again. I always give the people the example. If you swing a hammer at a nail and you accidentally hit your thumb, are you going to swing it again and be like, that was a mistake? Or are you going to move your thumb out of the way?
Move your fucking thumb, bro. Yeah. It's reminiscent of like Jordan's flu game. You know what I mean? Like everyone always references that, but he's had a lot of fucking wins, but he gets the flu or he gets food poisoning or whatever. He's still able to perform at a high level,
So. You can self-talk yourself into or out of something, but that's just acute persuasion. That's very different than having conviction in the fact that it doesn't matter. When I was competing in strongman quite often, I had some success. My mantra at my peak of success was, you got to shoot me. It was like, the only way I'm not going to do this today is if you shoot me. I can get a stomach ache, I can puke, I can only eat bananas, I'll starve. There's just no scenario where I will not complete this task. You literally have to physically disable me for this. And look, that's intense, but strongman's intense. You pick mantras that match what you want to do in your personality, right? But it's always going to be acceptance of the possibilities that allows you to perform, Putting 1,000 pounds on your back, Mark, is never not going to be scary back in the day, right? But it doesn't mean you didn't squat it, right? So there's that dichotomy. You need to be accepting of what you're doing to be fully participant, submerged, all that stuff in what you're doing as well.
So like lowering expectations might not be a bad idea, or reinterpreting what you're expecting of yourself.
Yeah, reinterpreting, because we don't want to, for example, let's say you've had recent failures. You're like, I just don't want to get teched here. It's like, that's a terrible expectation, you know? But the expectation should be, I want to get a takedown when I feel nervous. You know what I mean? And that's how you would start. And be like, okay, I felt nervous. It was 10 seconds left on the clock, where normally I'd be like, I'm just going to fight and hand fight and just hope nothing happens in 10 seconds because I'm scared, my heart rate's high. But instead, no, take a shot and I want you to go for that shot for real. Don't just put your head down and do one of these and hope they're close. Take a shot. You know what I mean? And that small success is wow, I was actually able to do something not stupid as shit when I was nervous today. Let's do something slightly less stupid next time.
Yeah.
Damn. What you got, Andrew?
Well, I'm just thinking because I haven't lost in jiu-jitsu because I've never competed in jiu-jitsu. I'm still within my
undefeated.
Yeah, I'm undefeated. Also winless.
That's okay. We don't need to share that part.
I'll edit that out. But yeah, I plan on competing at some point this year. So I'm kind of figuring out how I can approach that with, as far as not having expectations, but I want to also still be positive. And I don't have a negative experience with competing to be like, hey, 95% chance I'm probably going to get, X, Y, and Z might happen. So for someone like me, what advice would you give for the first time competitor going in?
I'd start with, so it's funny, the confidence is the discrepancy between how you view yourself and how culture reaffirms you. So having a confidence issue means I think I'm skinny and you told me I'm fat. Like people think confidence issues have to do with like, oh, I'm sad, I'm this, I'm that. It's like, no, something I believed was seemingly not true to the people that I care about. That's all a confidence issue is. So when you're doing something new, the reason people tend to feel like they lack confidence because they don't have a self-image. You know what I mean? So I would ask your coach, Andrew, be like, hey, like, what do you see in my jiu-jitsu? What's the typical vibe? What am I good at? What do I suck at? Watch yourself on video and start with like, who am I? Who's my sport self, if you will? Then that'll give you some more data. It's like, wow, sports self is like actually kind of intense. Like, you know, Andrew's a pretty cool laid back guy, but maybe it's like kind of intense. And like, he really likes to shoot single legs and like put his forehead in someone's floating ribs along the way. You know what I mean? Something crazy like that. So it's like, all right, well, my expectations should probably be to not back down if I'm an aggressive guy going out for the first time. You know, you look at that mistake, especially the first time, try to avoid it and then give yourself something to chase. Don't attach it to numbers or wins. Just say, maybe if I get put in this scenario, I just don't want to be a little bitchier. You know what I mean? And that's where you start with. Not saying that you will, but you get the idea, right?
Yeah,
or maybe
absolutely.
it's like, maybe for the first match, like I snapped this guy's head down and I just got this huge hormone rush and I just wanted to punch him in the sternum. You know what I mean? And maybe when you get that hormone rush, it's don't overreact. Don't do something crazy. You know, have a managed expectation of what you can realistically do that does not impede your self-image as an athlete. And then as you develop that self-image, then you could start talking about strategies and do I want to win this match or who am I going against? But if you don't know who you are, you know, there are not many decisions you can make.
What about like associating with like a badass character from a movie or like a superhero?
So one of my diffusion drills.
I know like little kids do that. Like a lot of little
drill.
kids that have, sometimes they're not having a hard time at home, but kids that have a hard time at home, they'll go around in a cape like all the time. You know, they'll go around in like a Batman cape or Superman cape all the time because they want that strength and security from that. And I think that's actually pretty intuitive.
100%. Kids are geniuses. You know, children are actually the only way you could form new language. You don't realize until you think about, like, you start to get old and you hear some kid say something, you're like, what is that mean? You know, and like, you lose it because what passes on language is generations. Like, like imagine if all of us in like our adulthood now is like, I'm going to make up a new word and see if it catches on. And like you say it to one of your friends, you're like, dude, what's wrong with you? You know what I mean? It's just like, you can't do that. You know, children are what manifest and promote these changes. So one of my favorite diffusion drills are how you kind of separate from something you don't want to identify with. With one of the golfers I'm working with right now, is he had some really bad negative memories recently, had some mental health stuff. So he loves baseball. So it's like, all right, we're going to do something that has to do with baseball in your drill. And we're going to have you do a spatial diffusion drill because I added that like little skill aspect to it for him to really pull him out of the scenario, to kind of force you to, one, actually change your brain, but more importantly, two, let yourself not identify with what you're feeling for a second and then return to participation.
So, like, when it comes to, if somebody wants to, I guess, start doing something, let's say that they don't view themselves as being a good grappler, or they don't view themselves as being, you know, good at whatever it is they're doing, what should they try to do today?
Get a win.
Get a win.
Start with the smallest win and
Okay.
make it happen. So maybe the smallest win is just setup. It's like, oh, I just keep shooting my shot with no setup, you know? So it's like, I don't even care about hitting the shot. I just want to hit a setup today. And then force yourself to hit the setup. And it's like, great, that was a win. Let me take some new pep afterwards because maybe you're a more intense guy. You don't need it beforehand. Take some new pep and some CBD afterwards. You get your heart rate down. You got that win. Long-term potentiation is what happens after you're done exercising in the brain with your motor pattern. It stays on. You could learn. Next time, it's like, all right, I want to do the setup and then, you know, make that first step. Again, I don't care about the shot yet because I have too many bad memories with this shot to just jump right into hitting that double. I want to hit the setup and then fake it or just do it. And even if the shot's shit, my only goal today was to hit the setup and then take a step. and going that way. People are, like I said, with the fat loss, they're always just jumping ahead. You know, I took 47th this week. I'm going to come back and win the tournament next week. It's like, oh, are you now? You know, I'm not saying you can't, but it's like, I'd be very impressed if you made that jump, because you don't have a branch to swing to like Tarzan. You're going to broad jump from that branch to that tree over there. All right, buddy, like see if you could sink it, but go for it. You know, you can be a hero, but the likelihood of you doing so is low. So whenever I tell people, especially as professionals, look at what the potential for success is. If you're walking into a meeting and you know you have this deal closed and all you got to do is sign it and smile, the worst thing you could do is go in there hot and try hard. When you have a high likelihood of success, the best strategy is being mindful and present. You only want to try really hard at things you suck at logically.
And like, for example, in the context of a lifter, you were talking about like Tiger Woods ritual. It would be beneficial for lifters if they feel like, oh, my conventional deadlift form is shit. They need to figure out how to have just a ritual before that lift and just get in some good repetitions so that they can bake in those motor patterns.
Yeah, pretty much. Because, so for example, like, you know, I was great at yoke walk, and I was able to get myself to a point where I would just think of like a rocket ship taking off, and that was my whole yoke warm up. I wouldn't have to get under the yoke at all. And it just took me a long time, but I was actually quite good at it. I did 865 in 9 seconds. That was in training. It wasn't a competition. I've done 800 in competition in under 10 seconds.
Wow.
But I was able to train myself where thinking of this rocket ship takeoff just made everything triggered. But that's obviously comes with mastery. So let's say you're that grappler, right? And you're like, you know, I heard someone say this and I want to envision myself as a fucking samurai and cut this guy's head off or some shit like that, right? You don't have the skill to be able to do that in the first place. So maybe you need to start with a spatial drill. It's just you in a stance or just you in a gi and you go in 360. And then the next step is seeing you hit the setup, and eventually you'll be able to be that samurai who cuts someone's head off and shoot a double, but that only comes with mastery. So if you want to start, your first visualization drill might just be diffusing from stress, and it could have nothing to do with grappling. You could imagine yourself on a beach with your girl, and that's literally step one for you, just to get yourself in a place where you can participate. Then step 2 is, okay, let's do that spatial drill. Then step 3 is maybe let's see you hitting the shot quickly and then slow it down immediately. One of the best ways to go from a novice to really good at spatial abilities is to alter the speed. So imagine like you see the Nike commercial and it's like someone throwing a football and it's like, right?
Yeah.
Make that your spatial drill. So it's like, all right, I want to see speed stop and own it. And then all of a sudden return to that speed. That's a great way to kind of progress through the intermediate stages. And then eventually you just think of like X.
And I mean, curious about like these spatial drills for the athletes you work with. I know it's probably a pretty big deal, but what is like, how often and maybe how long do you tell them, hey, I want you to try to visualize or think of this for at least this much each day or this much every few days? How often do you think this is something that people should try to do?
Most people suck at it just because we don't ever get taught early on in life to practice it. So just do it every day. Even if you sit there and you're just like, feel like an idiot and you're like, oh, I don't see shit. You did get better at it, you know? And eventually it'll get better, but you need to, it's legitimately a skill, you know? Some people can just do it much easier than others. But just like weightlifting, like you didn't just walk in and squat 405 day 1 with perfect form. You had to get yourself there a little bit. So when you're doing these spatial drills, it pretty much needs to be done daily. And the cool part is, and this is sometimes what makes people lack buy-in, you could do the spatial drill having to do with anything to make yourself better at X. You could just think of the Rubik's Cube, and if everyone did the Rubik's Cube drill in their head, they would get better at it. Maybe it's boring, maybe it's hard, but whatever. But it's worth it because anxiety is essentially nothing more than too much electrical stimulation or ionic or hormonal, whatever, too much stimulation in your brain, and it can't be centered into the cortical region or the brain area that you're using. So it's spilling over to other areas. And now what's happening is your field isn't just like field of vision in front of you having to do with the microphone. It's the microphone. Is my stove on? Oh my God. I think I got screwed on the flight on the way here. And you're thinking about all these things that are taking you away from the moment. So spatial drills over time, and the reason they're so valuable for athletes is because you actually increase the ceiling of how much electrical stimulation you can handle.
Oh man. This is exciting.
Yeah. Do you have any other instructions? Like you said, you had somebody visualize like a whole 360 rotation of like looking down at them, the speed thing. Is there any other like instruction that you give?
Those are my favorite ones. Just like be consistent. Like it could literally be like Nsima's Yeti water bottle to start. I'm just gonna like see the whole thing in 360 or whatever it is. Like, maybe if you like art, you can like see a drawing. It could literally be anything. And again, that's what I was saying. Like sometimes what turns people off because it makes you think you're a charlatan. But the brain is just so much more advanced than your other organs that it does. Like think about what I said about the monkeys. You don't even have to have a friggin' arm attached to you to change your right arm nerves. Like think about how crazy that is. So it's more of a lack of appreciation and understanding than it is like, oh, your drill wasn't good. You can do the dumbest drill on the planet and it'll work.
What was that free throw study?
Oh yeah, there's some really interesting information on that. I forget exactly what it was, but there was guys that actually shot a free throw. There were people that I forget what the other people were doing,
they
but there's some people that
visualized it and then people that
visualizing.
did both.
Right. And I think the combination of the two was the winner. For myself, I found it. I think this can go a little too far, and I think if you're like getting to the professional level, and maybe it could be like overkill at a certain point. But I think that it's important early on in someone's new endeavor to have access to the sport in as many different ways as possible, in the easiest ways as possible. Something as simple as like your jujitsu place is like down the street from your house. Like that's a good start because you're probably going to be consistent with it. But even beyond just that, maybe now that you picked up, running or bodybuilding or jujitsu, now your library looks a little bit different, right? Now you have a book that shows the execution of these moves, or you learn the history of jujitsu. Like where did jujitsu come from? You submerge yourself in it. And when I was powerlifting, I would watch tons and tons of videos of other lifters lifting. And after a while, I started to kind of recognize, okay, well, that's that guy, and that's that guy, and that's not necessarily me. However, I can still take little chunks of what this guy is doing and little chunks of what this person's doing. And then I started to kind of match up with, oh, that guy kind of like, I think that guy's like similar height to me. Oh, he's in the same weight class. Oh, okay, well, he's got some of the same things he's going through. I probably need to go through. And I started to kind of just be able to mimic some of the stuff that they're doing. And I found that to be huge. So like something like mimicking is something that's so underrated. But if you can mimic something that somebody is doing, or if you can figure out ways to surround yourself with the information, looking up stuff on YouTube and being relentless with it. Anytime you have a chance or opportunity to have a small break. Now your podcasts change too. Now you're not just listening to regular podcasts. Now you're listening to podcasts by jiu-jitsu people, or again, whatever your sport is. I think that is massively important. And again, in my powerlifting career, I remember I would, after my shower, the mirror would have moisture on it or whatever, and I would write down my numbers, the numbers I wanted. I'd write, for months and months and months and months, I would write down 1,000 pounds over and over again. I'd see it over and over again. I'd talk about it in the gym. I'd talk about it with other lifters. I'd talk about it with other guys that had the same goal. I'd talk about it with guys that already did it, and I would gather information, like, how is this going to actually happen? How is this going to actually go down? And when I unracked 1,000 pounds for the first time in competition, it was nothing. It was like a beautiful thing. I was sitting in the hole with the weight. Well, maybe not the hole because I always squatted high. I'm a cheater. But I was at the bottom of my squat. And I just remember, like, this is awesome. Like, and I felt the strongest at the very bottom, which I never even felt like that ever again in my powerlifting career. But at the bottom of squats, probably where you should feel the worst. But I visualized that so much and ran through that so many times. And it's also by no mistake or maybe by my mistake, I didn't envision 1,100 pounds. And I squatted 1,080. That's where the story ended. And then same thing with the deadlift. I ended with like a 766 deadlift, but I really wanted an 800-pound deadlift. But when it came to deadlifting, I didn't have the same confidence. I didn't have the same carefree flow that I had with the other two lifts. And so therefore I wasn't able to perform it the same way. I also was just the least interested in it. So I thought about it less. So I practiced those visualization things a lot less. I didn't put as much into it. And that's what you end up getting out of it.
100%. When you speak about something, it gets spoken into reality. You know, it's not just like this random like hippie thought. It's real. You know, so it's like you only, you know, it's funny. I'm saying this because I have to pee right now. Like when you mention it is when you really have to pee. Like think about how many times you're driving home and you're like, I'm good. And you're 5 minutes away from the house. You're, oh my God, you're like, I'm not making this. You know what I mean? But then you're actually
holding the keys into the doorknob. Like that's when it's over. Like,
Drop them.
But then every now and then you'll get home and you're, oh my God, I forgot I had to pee somehow. You know, all these managed perceived realities, because people think that like we're not in control of what we're perceiving, but we very, very much are actually. You know, maybe it's not direct, some of your heart rate. You can't directly bring your heart rate down and up through breathing, but I can get you pretty close. You know, if you just Wim Hof breathing, you're not going to do that with a 64 beats per minute heart rate. That's not the point either, but it's like you can have this relationship. So when you're looking at something like that 1,000-pound squat again and again in so many different scenarios, you actually have like an affinity for it rather than a repulsion from it. You were getting to that 1,000-pound, you're like salivating because you've thought about it, you've seen it so many times. Now the moment's finally here. Whereas with the deadlift, you know, 776 was probably pretty close. And then when it got to the time for 800, you just didn't have that same affinity for it. So in fact, when you broke the ground and it felt heavy, you're like, fuck this. But when you unracked
That's heavy.
right? When you unracked 1,000 pounds, though, you're like, probably, I wanted this to be heavy. I was expecting it to be heavy. So you have a different response. You know, for example, let's say someone was like, go lift up that car. And you're like, I can't lift that car. But it's like, oh, your girlfriend's under it or your baby's under it or something. You're going to lift that car with no second thought. And that's what I mean about this perceptual reality. You created a scenario in your brain where that moment coming to life was not just the most enthralling, exciting thing. You had been prepared for it from a neurochemical, a muscular, a technique, and all this other stuff. So you might have fully been able of deadlifting 800 pounds, but you couldn't create a reality and be mindful and have an affinity to the moment that allowed you to do so. So when I spoke about sports psychology back in the day, you know, it's crazy how COVID killed all that stuff for me. It needed to happen eventually. I wasn't going to make any money being a speaker, but I would speak about you walk up to your deadlift. You're getting ready for your third attempt at a meet, and you open up the curtain, and it's St. Peter's Basilica in Italy on Christmas Day. It's like, do you hit that deadlift? It's like, fuck no, you're not going to hit that deadlift. You know what I mean? Like, you're at church. Like, it's Christmas Day in Italy. You know what I mean? Like, or the Vatican or whatever it is. Like, you're not going to hit that deadlift because that environment, that reality is so different than what you envisioned. You will not be like allowed
Trying to lift all quiet.
Yeah. Like, you know, like your brain's not going to let those signals be sent, you know, whereas let's say you did it and it was like a grungy gym and like music was blasting and there's like blood on the floor in the corner. You're like, dude, I can literally do whatever I want here. No one's going to say shit.
Do you want to pee?
Yeah. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'll be quick, guys.
Power Project family, your normal shoes are making you weak. This is why I partner with Vivo Barefoot Shoes, because they have a wide toe box, they're flat, and they're flexible. So with every single step you're taking, if you're taking a 10-minute walk outside, or when you're working out in the gym, your feet are able to do what they're supposed to do in this shoe. They have tons of options for hiking, running, training in the gym, chilling and relaxing, casual shoes for if you're out on a date. You need to check them out. And Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, that's over at vivobarefoot.com/powerproject, and you guys will receive 15% off your order automatically. Again, vivobarefoot.com/powerproject. Links to them down in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
Where exactly did we leave off?
We were talking about how you had to pee.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Like the visualization, perception, reality, all that stuff.
Yeah, these guys were just commenting on, you know, how they feel it's going to be really helpful to, I think both of them probably have been practicing some of it to some degree, but how it's going to be helpful with their jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it's funny. You know, I think going back to what you said, or I think Nsima asked it, what's the most archaic thing going on, what you see in the golf world or sports as a whole? You know, part of the reason why I did go Super Brain in the first place, you know, separate from my private stuff and brought it around, whatever you want to call it, was because, you know, I'm a chatty guy similar to Mark. So I would always ask people like, hey, like, real quick, give me 3 things you know about the brain. And the answers I would get would be like, concussions are bad, like caffeine makes me go fast, and like, you know, if I drink enough alcohol, I'm not smart, you know? Yeah. And it's like, there's just there's this massive like separation between like what people know about their brain and like life. You know, like people know a decent about the muscles. Like you just inherently know how to eat, right? If you wanted to lose weight one day, you wouldn't go to McDonald's, get a double quarter pounder, and then look in the mirror and be like, I can't believe I'm fat. I'm shocked. I can't believe it, right? You know,
A lot of people do that though.
maybe. Yeah, I guess so. I don't
There's
know
a
why
lot.
yeah, I can't figure it out. I thought that chocolate cake was going to lean me out, but it just didn't, you know? But it's just not as intuitive for the brain, you know? So I think creating awareness about what the brain actually does, the rules and all that stuff is huge, you know? That nootropics ebook I'm going to bring out in a little bit, I think it's going to be it's probably almost done by now with my graphic team. Probably be up for sale like 2 weeks from now, like end of April. I talk about the dichotomy of north and south of the neck. And I talk about the Mason-Dixon line as an analogy where it's like, once you're north of the neck, what you knew about the immune system and antioxidants does not apply in the brain anymore. So maybe we want to minimize free radicals in the muscle outside when we train, but free radicals are what put you to sleep at night. You know what I mean when it comes to the brain function. If you want antioxidant in the brain, it might not be the best to do that before bed because we need these shifts and things to happen throughout the day. So being aware that the brain has different rules, I think is going to be one of those things that in the next couple of years, and maybe it's a decade, with sports performance is going to change it. So a lot of the golfers I work with, they're playing the same games. They're doing all the same practice drills that they were doing before working with me, but we change them in a small way to make them more receptive to their brain so they learn from the drill better. Maybe we do it in a slightly different environment. Maybe it's as simple as using different verbiage. You know what I mean? So especially in golf, one drill I do with people playing like what's called short game, like short distance shots, is not only do you need to call it out, I want you to talk about the shot shape prior to it happening. And then I want you to manifest what you just said to me. Instead of just saying, I want to hit this ball to 5 feet. What I want you to now say is, I want to see the ball go through this flight pattern and roll out a lot or a little and then make it happen. And if you don't, you realize you have a lack of association. Maybe there's a certain amount of tension you need to put on like 1 foot before you create a lateral drop. You know, I'm sure Nsima knows what that is. So it's a wrestling. I don't know if you guys use that in grappling, but regardless, a lateral drop's a type of throw.
Yeah.
You need to have a certain amount of weight on one throw so you can create that change and go the opposite direction. Whereas if you have an unequal distribution of weight or whatever it is, and you still hit the throw, you're actually not going to learn from it the same way. You won't be able to reproduce it because you didn't put your body in a scenario where it can listen. It makes a lot of sense when you think about the physical body. When we talk about how the brain listens, let's say you thought that shot was going to go to 5 feet and roll out another 5 feet, but in fact you flew it 7 feet and it only rolled out 2 feet. Doesn't sound like a big difference to us, but when you're talking about maybe the slope of this green is like this and it creates a shot that you didn't want. Now you did the correct thing, but you have an improper association with what happened in real life. So you're not actually doing what you think you're doing. You just said you wanted to hit it to 2 feet and you hit 3 different shots at 2 feet.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. Your brain won't learn from it the same way. So I'd actually rather you hit terrible shots, but know exactly how the shot's going to go and be in exact control of the shot rather than just be like, oh, that was good.
Yeah, maybe 10 years ago when I started listening to, I guess, personal development type stuff, I remember hearing somebody saying, like, really define your goals. And then for me, I think partially just the way that my brain works, I happen to see everything a little backwards, which fucks me up and slows me down sometimes, but also gets me to the finish line before everybody because I already got there because I already saw it. So working backwards has been something that's really helpful for me, but in defining the goal and painting a picture, as you're saying, like how far are you going to hit the ball? What club are you going to use? What if it's windy? Like, what are you going to do if it's, you know, you've had trouble in the past when it's been windy, you know, in the last golf game or whatever. You know, now what are you going to do with it? Be really descriptive of exactly how you're going to reach some of your goals. That's been really helpful, I've noticed.
Massively so, because doesn't just tell you the end outcome, which everyone's obsessed with. It tells you how you're going to get there. And if you know how you're going to get there, you also inherently know how you should start. And if you know how you should start, how to get there, and how to finish, it's much easier to just put it into reality and to put it into something your brain can actually see in your head. And it's funny because now all the conversation we've had kind of summates into one centralized idea where it's not just visualization, it's not just proper training and supplementation, it's really this whole picture of what are you telling your body and brain, what's happening actually, and is that difference something that you're comfortable in accepting?
It's really cool because you're trying to have the individual implant as much detail into it as possible. Because like there's some people that have really good instincts with some of these things. So like a guy, he's been shooting threes for a long time. So he has like an instinct to understand how it feels, everything. But like when you start to put more detail into like, let's say, how it feels leaving your hand, all those little things, it can maybe cement it a bit better into application.
100%. And that's what I was ultimately describing as how I got to the yoke walk as a rocket ship for me at the very end, level of mastery. Because actually, in reality, the rocket ship gave me associations of my feet and the tension I want to create. And I just taught myself that these are now associated. You know, it's the same way kids have weird names for things, but like you know what it is and the kid knows what it is and the same thing happens. Right? Maybe with your best friend, you could say something totally stupid and backwards, but they understand you, and like that understanding happened, you know? And that's really what we're talking about here is, does the image in your head match up with the reality that you want it to match up with?
I'm curious about this. We've been getting a lot into the feet for the past 1.5 to 2 years, and I want to know, is there anything that you've noticed or anything that you've been thinking about when it comes to the feet of the athletes you work with?
Feet's huge. Like it's the three anatomical areas I put my emphasis on are feet, ribs, and neck. And I just believe, you know, through my own theories, if you manage those, you're very, very unlikely to have reoccurring issues elsewhere that aren't like instantaneous or due to something random or acute, right? So when it comes to the feet, the most important thing everyone needs to understand about the feet from a brain perspective is the information through afferent, efferent signaling. Imagine a two-way street. One goes from the outside world to your brain, one's from the brain to the outside world. The information, electricity, and everything taken in by your feet is going to create the ceiling on how much force your hips and ribs can produce muscularly. So like try to go take a shot with like Uggs on and then try to take the same double leg shot with barefoot, like on the mat. And it's not going to be like a thing where it's like, oh no, I could do this in Uggs. Like, no, you definitely cannot. You know what I mean? And that's really like the reason I focus on the feet is because that's our communication mainly with the outside world. When you're walking downhill, how come you can run downhill and not tear your ACL? It's because of your feet. It's not your hamstrings, it's your feet. How come you can like, you know, walk for miles and then do a perfect golf swing? It's because of your feet. You know, it's not because of your brain. Your brain's deciding what to do based on the information taken in by the feet. And plus, everyone I deal with for the most part wears cleats, whether it's like football or golf. All these field sports are wearing cleats, and you have what's called cleat foot, or I call it cleat foot. And like the foot becomes rounded. Same thing in wrestling shoes. If you've seen it in Nsima, you know, they get like the flat. Like I always describe it, it's like you look like a Subway sandwich roll. Your foot looks like a Subway sandwich. It's like that perfect floppy. It's not really edema inflamed, but you can see there's a little bit of like lacking veins, lacking that natural arches, not just the medial arch, but all the arches of the foot. And like they flip it upside down, it literally just looks like a hoagie roll. You know what I mean? Like
The foot's dead.
Yes, it's not a coincidence you have low back pain. It's probably not even your low back. It's probably your feet.
Yeah, the feet are such a massive thing. And then these guys being in cleats, do you have to talk I mean, if you're going to talk to them about the feet, I guess you might have to have conversations around like walking and standing. If they have symptoms of maybe lower back or knee issues and so forth?
I try to approach it as little as possible because most of the athletes I deal with are already nasty by the time they meet me. So it's more like, you know, roll out your feet with a golf ball, play some of these games I was telling you about with your feet, pick up the thingy, see if you could throw it into the circular area, and then wear the toe spreaders at night after you put the cleats on, and just go be a savage.
You don't want to give them too much shit.
You know, so I'm curious about, have you ever heard of Code Footwear?
Code? No.
I'm curious about your thoughts on it because it's a company where they make custom cleats for the athlete's foot. So like an athlete can send whatever print of their foot and then they'll make cleats that actually fit their foot. I'm curious if you think, because cleats up until this point have always had a pointed tip, But do you think that something like that could be beneficial for field athletes, or do you think that there's a reason why cleats need to have a tip that's pointed?
So there's two sides to this story, because I actually was getting into the shoe world a little bit, working potentially with some golf industry, well-known places for creating orthotics that were specifically made for left and right-handed golfers, so you can make each shoe individual to the side you swing from. Because if you think about being left and right-handed in golf, is the exact opposite. And I've talked to a couple other companies about creating better cleats. So yes, there is a specific reason that wrestling shoes, football cleats, they all have like that like rock chip, like weird, almost like shape to them. And one, it's because how you're going to cut through the air, the same aerodynamics as a car. But two, when you make that initial point of ground contact, you're going to have a better opportunity to propel yourself through the ground. If you make ground contact with a square, you're going to make a chunk into the ground. So you see what I mean? There is some aspect to it. The tip is also going to allow you to propel better. Whereas if it's a square shape, for example, or even a triangle shape, like hyper tipped, you're not going to be able to propel off that. That's why you could still be crazy fast in cleats and have the grossest feet on the planet. You know what I mean? So there is room to be in the middle, I believe. We need the aerodynamics for obvious reasons, especially interaction. Like what if the ground's really soft? You need that tip as well to not sink into the ground the same way. Different types of cleats. You'll see in the Super Bowl especially, guys will come out with different cleats in the second half because now the turf or the grass is all messed up. Maybe it started raining. Maybe it's colder now. Like this is really, really common stuff that not everyone thinks about. So the shoe game is massively important, not just for customizing it to the athlete's foot, but as weird as it sounds, also making the athlete's foot fit to the cleat better. Because ultimately, I can tell you, like, this is the perfect shoe, blah, 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 but if it doesn't make you faster, then it's not worth it. So we also need to get athletes to fit into these cleats better in a weird way. So that's why cleat foot's a novel thing, because I don't want to change too much about the foot, because maybe I make you like this perfect foot and then you're slower, One of the issues in a lot of physical therapy practices that they don't realize is they're actually making athletes acutely worse quite often, because like maybe we're going to solve for this asymmetry you have in your hips, but you play an asymmetrical hip sport. Not very many basketball players go for two-footed layups or go to layups 50% on each side. They're always going to favor one side. All of a sudden, if you change something about their rib kinematics and they're a layup guy on the left side and all this, you're going to make them worse at it. You're going to make golfers worse at golf by fixing their ribs and their neck to be symmetrical, when in reality, there's nothing symmetrical about this. We want you to be healthy enough to perform without any degradation, but I also want you to be the fucking best. Like, I want you to go out there and be like, I took fifth, but like I have a perfect rib cage. It's like, oh, sick, dude. Nice job enjoying fifth. You know what I mean? Like, it just is what it is. No one hires you to make you like worse, but feel cooler or whatever it is. And that's one of the gripes I have with the physical therapy world sometimes is it's similar to doctors, ego-driven. In my mind, at points. It's not that it's bad, but they're going to continue to profit off of someone who may or may not make sports performance improvements. So whenever I make my contracts with athletes, I always make it win as a team, lose as a team. I don't want to be paid more if you suck. Like, I don't deserve it, and therefore, if you get better, obviously I deserve to be compensated a little more, but that's because we're making synergistic movements together as a team. Whereas if you tell me you have tight glutes and I make your glutes looser, but you still lose, like, I still did my job, quote unquote. And I think that's one of the dichotomic issues with sports performance nowadays is they'll bring people on staff who aren't going to mutually progress in their career and financially as the athlete progresses.
Have you talked to some of these high level athletes before and just been a little confused on like maybe the fact that certain things haven't been they haven't heard of certain things before, or you're like, you already have a coach. I don't understand what, like, because a lot of times they have a lot of coaches along the way, right?
There's this particular athlete right now where we're having a management issue as a team because someone on the team isn't doing a good job and they're blaming other people and they're being very abrasive, and the athlete's suffering because of it. So, I manage his performance. So in a way, it is my job to help manage the other practitioners. So now I have to go to him and be like, hey, the way you approached him after our tournament this weekend was inappropriate. The way you approached it made him feel worse. You put yourself before the athlete, and ultimately it was your failure and you blamed someone else. So instead of looking in the mirror and saying, I need to improve how I function to make the team and this athlete better, you decided to berate this person, blame it on someone else, and then go home and let them think that their negative performance was someone else's fault. In reality, it's always your fault. And that's a good thing if you believe it's your fault, because then you could take ownership over what happened, accept it, and get better in the future. But if you go home now thinking that this guy screwed me over and that's why I didn't do well today, the likelihood of you doing better next tournament actually gone down.
Power Project family, how's it going? Now, we like to look good in the gym and out of the gym. That's why you always see Mark and I and Andrew is stepping up on the short game, wearing shorts from Viore and clothes from Viore. And honestly, the number one compliment that I've seen, that I've gotten, and even Mark's gotten, is, damn, your butt looks good. And that's because, well, the clothes we wear make our booties look delicious. Andrew, how can they get it?
Yeah, you guys both have pretty big wagons. You guys can head over to viore.com/power project. That's VUORI.com/power project to receive 20% off the most amazing apparel that looks so good inside and outside of the gym.
It's going to make your ass look fat,
and your ass will look fat. Links to them down in the description, as well as the podcast show notes. God damn it.
That's a good one. That's a good one. It'll make your ass look fat.
Have you seen anything common amongst a lot of the athletes that you work with in terms of like what they're able to do in the weight room? Like, how much of an impact does the weight room have? Do some guys like hardly need any of it, or like what have you kind of seen? Because working with these high level people, it's a different world out there than just working with your average person.
The most mind-blowing thing, because obviously I came from the strength world just like you guys did, the weight on the bar isn't strength. I've seen guys who are mind-numbingly strong on the field, like will literally destroy a 400-pound human on the field, but don't need more than 30 pounds on a split squat to get what they need out of it. And conversely, I've seen guys who can bench 100-pound dumbbells that have club speeds in golf that are lower than like the weak guys on tour. And that's what made that like stupid nerdy joke earlier about the only difference is your sensory motor cortex, right?
It's getting a little funnier. Yeah. It's like hitting me different now.
But that's like what it is. Like your muscles being activated are like electrical phenomena. It's like the light switch, they're pretty friggin' stupid. Like they just respond to calcium ions. They go through the binding, bending, bridging, blah, blah, blah. But what determines how much force you can put into that 130-pound dumbbell split squat comes from upstairs in your brain. So maybe they can just contract harder per calcium ion, or maybe per pound of force with pound on the dumbbell, they can just produce more, or whatever it is. The correlation between strength and load on the bar with professional athletes is not the same correlational value I see with intermediates. With intermediates, regardless of sport, I see it mattering. When I see people get to these upper echelons of skill, the correlation goes down.
Is there a way that, like, let's say an athlete does want to become more explosive on the field or on the mats or in sport, is there a way that they can train themselves, train their brain to become better at that?
Yeah, so inherently you would call it game-like scenarios or activities, and that's the terminology I use. I think when we talk training, I instantly think sets, reps, and rigidity, but that's not an exercise activity or a game that I was describing earlier. So let's say maybe you play football and you want to have a better cut. It's funny when you look at what do the best people with a juke move do, it's actually laxicity of their head. You see the worst jukers. Yeah, see, you even just did it a little bit. The worst jukers just do this. Right? The best guys kind of do what Nsima did. It's like your hips are going this way, your head's going that way, that one foot's over there, and you still ended up over there. So one, realizing what the true thing you want to train is the most important part. And when people talk about the laws of training or the pillars of training back in the day, it's like progressive overload, individual difference, sport specificity, volume, and volume, sets, and rest. Like all these pillars of training. It's not what you think it is. Progressive overload is not slapping 5 pounds on the bar. It has to do with biological stress, which obviously is a more encompassing term. The law of specificity isn't, well, I want my quads to be shortened, so I should shorten my quads. It's like, Yeah, well, you got to go both ways here.
Yeah.
The law of specificity has to do with if you are in this juke-like scenario, we're looking at what muscles need to be tight, what muscles need to be loose, and the rhythm and cadence associated with the movement is what has the greatest degree of transfer. You can read Anatoly Bondarchuk is technically the winningest Olympic coach of all time. You're nodding your head, so I guess you've heard of him before. Mm-hmm. His Transfer of Training in Sport, volumes 1 and 2, is one of the few books that I could say is like close to your only go-to needed to understanding this stuff. It's not easy to read because it's translated from like the 50s and whatever country the name Anatoly Bondarchuk comes from. No disrespect to him, but yeah, whatever country it comes from, it's a little difficult to read, but he's the best in my mind at talking about the transfer of training in sport. So if you wanted to have a better juke move and your squat max went from 455 to 500, you probably got worse.
Are you saying that because like to go from like 405 to 500, you have to usually be able to create better stiffness, and that's not going to necessarily be beneficial for being able to juke better?
Not just that, like, do you need more force to juke better? Like, maybe you do, maybe you don't. No. But if you didn't necessarily need that in the first place and you got more forceful, all you do is put more force into the earth, and Newtonianly, it may or may not have helped you move, because maybe there were so many newtons in the ground that you push back that your sternocleidomastoid on the ipsilateral side had to get tight to control it so you didn't go too far.
Yeah. Earlier you mentioned the feet, the ribs, and the neck. And we talked a little bit about the ribs and the neck earlier, but why, I don't think you explained why the ribs and the neck are so important like you did with the feet. So why are they as important as you put them out to be?
So the ribs, I'll start with, are obviously going to connect to your shoulders and your hips, like directly. Like you might think they're not touching, but that psoas pain you always have has to do with your ribs. It has nothing to do with your hips, most likely. If it had to do with your hips, it would have gotten better by using the pso-right. And if you have to use the pso-right every single day, nothing on the pso-right, you don't have a tight psoas. You have a rib problem. Every problem has a solution. So if you apply a solution and the problem is not solved, it evidently was not the solution. So I think the ribs are so important because when we look at sports on TV, do you have any sports besides like powerlifting that are like non-rotating at all? Like it's just, you can't rotate in sport and call it a sport, or can't not rotate in sports and call it sports. Even marathon running, Mark, is pretty much all rotational. Like your feet are not like this. Your feet are actually pretty much one in front of another, rotating back towards each other as you go. So the rotational aspect all comes from the ribs and the hips. I tend to avoid the hips because I think if my feet can control my femur and my ribs can control my hip bones, I no longer need to worry about them the same way. So if I can manage your feet, which are reciprocally going to work with your ribs. So for example, if I push off my left arch and activate my left glute, I have to turn my shoulders right. Right? Make sense?
Yeah.
If I do the opposite way, not only is it weird, that glute won't turn on. So if I go left arch, turn counterclockwise with the shoulder, it feels weird. Your low back turns on immediately, and that glute is soft as baby shit, right? Now, all of a sudden, you just turn those shoulders the other way, and you can literally, without even flexing, feel those glute fibers shorten, right?
Yeah.
We're on the same page here. So that's why I think their relationship is so important in everything. And also, they don't tend to get the love they need. Like your quads get plenty of blood flow, bro. You don't need to worry about blood flow to your quads too much unless you're running a marathon, Mark, right? Afterwards you need to recover and worry about it. But there's not a lot of awesome vasculature that helps recover your serratus anterior, your transverse abdominis, your internal obliques, these little muscles. They're often at a disadvantage and they're super important for being strong. So if you manage those and manage your feet, I think you end up taking care of like 80% of your body, in my opinion, without having to directly care for it. Because I think the days of doing the joint by joint approach are just long gone, in my opinion. Like, looking at your ankle mobility isolated and saying you have an ankle mobility problem might not make any sense anymore. And I just don't think it ever did. But I think there's a time and place for everything, and innovation must happen. If there was nothing stupid, you couldn't get smarter. I always tell people, like, I'll talk to anybody. I've gotten plenty of great ideas from stupid people, and they didn't realize they gave me that idea. Like, you know what I mean? They'll just like say some shit, and I'm like, okay. But then like it sticks with me. I'm like, oh my God, I've never thought about this before, right?
Yeah.
Kind of Mark saying how he mimicked and talked and learned from all these people. You don't have to be smart to get a good idea from someone. I've had plenty of instances where someone's like, oh, I just do this. I'm like, you discovered that? I'm like, wow, it's a genius. Like, I mean, I knew that, but like, I knew that. You didn't know that, and you still got to that answer, you know?
Yeah.
I start to learn so much more from people in that scenario. So I think those two are an integral part of human movement. And the reason I include the neck into that is, one, a lot of people just tend to have neck issues in general, traps, face, jaw, TMJ. We have more people with TMJ now than ever before. And we also have better dentistry than ever before. So it's like, how does that happen? But obviously there's a bigger problem. And also in most sports, you need head and skull to be able to dissociate from the rest of the body. And that obviously involves vision and all this stuff that needs to be trained. So imagine if like you couldn't dissociate from your head from your ribs and tried to play golf. You'd be like, like, you know, like you would never hit the golf ball or baseball or basketball. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you would never be able to perform in anything. So I think when you put the whole picture together, it's just a great ROI, like return on investment for the way of looking at things. Feet, ribs, and neck will pretty much solve 80 to 90% of your movement problems.
How can people like maybe do some self-care on their ribs?
The easiest way to do it, it's a fancy word, it's called your infrasternal angle. Lay on your back and have the video kind of going over like the front of you. So you could like see your body like in that like front line. And what you're going to do is you're going to see the angle of the sternum like a gas pedal, and it's going to go in 4 directions, up, down, left, right. And your ribs are going to do the same. You'll see asymmetries. You'll see them be like pokey in one area, flat in another, really hard in one area, soft and normal in the other. And that'll get you to start figuring stuff out. So if you notice that most people are going to have very flared left ribs compared to their right typically. So it's like, wow, if I have flared left ribs, it makes sense why I have right low back pain. And maybe it's like if my ribs are hard as shit, it probably makes sense why I can't do a sit up or like bend over to deadlift pain free or without feeling crazy tight.
Interesting. Okay.
So like lay on the ground, like videotape yourself breathing. Your ribs should move. Like there's just, the reason I like it too is because there's so many different types of rib dysfunction.
Yeah.
Whereas like, let's say we look at your knee. There's only so many ways your knee can be functional and dysfunctional. Like, you know, it's just, there's not tons of range of motion there. It's not connected to a ton of things. Like there's like 3 or 4 compensation patterns and like 1 or 2 good patterns you can pick. Yeah. But your ribs can do so much independent of what, you know, they need to be doing. You could have a super, super tight, gross rib cage. And you could still go for a run and get better. You know what I mean? So that's also why I like it. You know, you can have it completely independent of sports performance. So maybe you have a terrible resting heart rate and you just do some meditation and breathing drills for 2 weeks and that brings your resting heart rate down. It wasn't really that you lacked fitness to have a low resting heart rate. You lacked respiration. And there's a huge difference there, but you could still get fitter and leaner. Plenty of people get leaner, lowering their resting heart rate and getting healthier.
Would certain things like gut smashing and smashing around the area of the ribs be helpful to help loosen things up in that area?
Yeah, especially if you're tight, there's a difference between tight and inhibited. Tight is like actual tightness, very logical. Inhibited means an inability to do its job.
Yeah.
So you could just be stupid. You know, like motor stupid. Like just because you don't know how to use these rib cage muscles might be why they're tight. So you learn to use them and they get better. You know, so that's kind of also figuring out what it is. Yeah. Like I would guess like an MMA or a grappler, someone like yourself, Nsima, would have tighter ribs rather than being inhibited because you need to know how to use that rib cage really, really well. But it's also like most of your sport. So the odds are you're going to need to roll out your ribs the same way Mark needs to roll out his feet when he does his marathon work.
Yeah.
When it comes to being stupid, I would imagine that somebody like yourself has probably had this tested before. Any idea what your IQ is?
My senior year of high school.
I think only smart people get this done, by the way.
My senior year of high school. So I don't know how accurate it is. It was supposedly pretty solid. My senior year of high school, I tested at a 184 in AP psychology.
I don't even know what that means.
That's fucking high.
Okay.
That's what it is. God damn.
I haven't gotten it tested since then. I don't really care.
Yeah.
I think it's so it's funny. Like I've had like financial executives I work with use IQ testing as a measure of progress neuroplastically, and I've seen it go up 15 points. And I've also seen people like get wasted the night before and their IQ drops. So I kind of view it as like HRV in the sense where it's like, what's your HRV today? It's like, oh, my IQ today is this. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was originally created to help people get job placements. So it really just means like your ability to like remember, do random shit, think outside of the box and stuff like that. I don't know how much correlation it has to real life because like I said, I know people who are shockingly successful in their respective field and are literally dumb as shit. Like, you know what I mean? They just train their brains. Like it's unbelievable. Like, it's just
Figured out
true.
the algorithm, right?
Yeah. Like, so that's why I'm like, whatever. Like, what does that even mean? Like, how are you even telling me like I'm smart and I have one? Like, what does that really mean?
Yeah, smart in terms of what?
Yeah.
You know?
And like, I just, the IQ is just, like you said, it's an algorithm someone created in response to 200 multiple choice questions. It's like, what the fuck? Like,
Did you get the IQ test because like your parents noticed some sort of superhuman power that you had or something with your brain?
I was actually in special ed classes growing up. That was just part of AP Psych. And I remember my teacher came over to me. I did really bad in school. She goes, did you cheat? I was like, what? No, I barely even pay attention. Like she was, I'll never forget. She was kind of rude to me about it, but I remember.
You got a good score. What the hell is this?
There's no way you could get this.
Yeah,
teachers.
but I was just kind of lazy and like I just like did it. Like it intrigued me at the moment for whatever reason. But yeah, I actually growing up, my parents are Cuban immigrants, and when I was in like the third grade roughly, I remember I did so bad on a test. I was in a Catholic school. My teacher made me stand up in front of the class for the rest of class. I got like a 40 something on a test, and they were like having me tested for special ed and stuff. My parents flipped out because like they're super conservative, like Cuban immigrants. You're telling us our son is stupid. Like, how dare you say that? Our son's fine. It's like, no, we're not telling you that at all, ma'am. But they took it that way.
Yeah.
So, I don't think that stuff matters, Like I think if someone tells you you're dumb as shit, and maybe you are dumb as shit, but you can get smart. The same way I've met plenty of smart people who I'm like, wow, you're so intelligent. It's inhibiting your ability to not just be a human, but to work and actually help others. The most successful, the person I'm referencing owns one of the most successful hedge funds of all time. And I asked him, like, dude, you have some awesome employees. Like, is it just because you own this hedge fund and everyone like wants to just be with the best? Like, what is it? And he told me that he hires people based on the intersecting point between their EQ and IQ. He's like, if someone comes in with a 200 IQ, which is technically the highest you can get, he's like, I won't hire you if your EQ is really low. And if you come in with a super high EQ and a moderate IQ, and that intersecting point on a graph is higher than the 200 IQ person, he goes, I'll hire them.
Why does he do that?
Because it's your ability to actually manifest what you have in your head and deal with others and go through real life scenarios.
Yeah.
Like Mark said, the IQ test is an algorithm, so it doesn't actually test your ability to deal with stuff in real life. So let's say you were a professional athlete and you came to me and I was like, your feet are trash, your ribs are trash, you've never used your internal oblique once in your life, and all the stuff's terrible, and I was a dick to you, there's no chance you're going to get better. The same reason I said with every pro athlete I've ever worked with, it's like, we're going to talk every 3 days for 2 to 4 weeks, depending on what you have going on, and then we'll decide if we have a contract together.
Nice.
I think you have a awesome way about you in terms of like coaching. Just in my interaction with you, you're super calm and it's really helpful. And then you also, I think it would be easy as a coach to take some cheap shots here and there to tell someone that their ribs are shitty or that this is off or that's off. But I think you have a kind way about you. Did you have to learn that from? Or have you always kind of been that way?
I think I've always kind of been that way. Everyone has an ego-driven moment at one point in life, and I'm results-driven. I don't care like if you pay me $1,000 or $10,000. If I'm invested in your journey, I'm in it, bro. So I just think that when you tell someone something really negative like that, you're doing it for yourself. So the same way like we see parents like force their kids to do something. It's like, does your kid want to do that, or do you want your kid to do that? Is it a kid problem or is it a you problem?
Yeah.
So like me telling you that your feet are shit and your ribs are shit and you're number one in the world, I'm just big dicking you, coming in like, dude, look at me, I know all this shit, you're terrible. You know what I mean? Like, that's not gonna help anyone here, So it's like, what's the point really? I just don't see it.
And then athletes do that to themselves too. And like you talked about how important that is, that they need to reframe the way they speak about themselves. So actually, I'm curious about this. The amount of do you deal with that with pro athletes? Like, do many of them actually have negative self-talk? Because I imagine to get yourself to getting to that level, you gotta be kind to yourself, right? Or am I kind of wrong in that?
No, it's like in between. It's more of like I don't want to call it positive or negative, but it's like individually specific self-talk.
Okay.
So I know an athlete who's nasty at golf and he's awful to himself. I know an athlete who's amazing at golf and he's amazing to himself. So it's more of like how you personally respond. And look, if you're a slightly aggressive guy, your talk's probably going to be vaguely negative.
True.
But you need to figure out how to work that for yourself. And because the same way positive things can be destructive, negative things can be as well. So I think it's more that we see athletes create narratives that will inherently make them better regardless of what that is.
Yeah.
And that's always based on previous coaching experiences, I've noticed as well. So that one athlete I mentioned, like his heart rate came down like 30 or 35 beats over the course of a month. I was like, dude, have you been doing all this stuff? He goes, yeah, I'll never forget. He had his arms over a squat bar after we took it. And he's like, but I'm just gifted. And I stopped and I was like, no, you're not. He's like, what? I'm like, yeah, maybe you're a little gifted. But I was like, you did 28 straight days of work. Like, you can say you have gifts, but that's not why this result happened. And I've found that the athletes I'm like that with, I'm real and authentic with, not just perform better, we have better relationships.
Yeah.
Because I could have just like sat there and been like, yeah, bro, like your dick's massive. You know what I mean? It's huge, like the biggest dick ever, right? Like, like that wouldn't have
Like, I
done
gotta
anything.
pay this guy more. You get a raise.
Right? Like, what would that have done for either of us? Like, you need to be credited when you do something correct. You need to be discredited when you don't. So last night I had a conversation with an athlete where he's like, I want to make this and this change to the team. I was like, yeah, to be honest, but you need to practice this more. And he was like, what? I'm like, no, I'm just being honest. Like,
Yeah.
you could change whatever you want, but if you don't do this, we're not going to get better.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important aspect you can have is not just a coach, a service provider. Like, imagine the doctor that comes in before your surgery and he's like, it's fine, I'm just going to do this and that. And you're like, I'm sitting here with fucking cancer, bro. What do you mean you're just going to do this and that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we see it all the time, people that get discredited when something's actually very important. We see it in like our at-home relationships all the time. Maybe like you're the breadwinner and you're all excited about this and your significant other like, found $100 on the floor or did something and someone gave them a $20 tip and you're like, $20. I make 300 grand a year. You know what I mean? It's like, well, that mattered to them. Sure, it was $20 and it was only going to buy you like McDonald's or something, but like that's not why it was important.
Do you work on mindset and like philosophy with people, or is that something that's maybe outsourced or something like that?
As needed. The line I draw is obviously related to DSM. Like, once I see something that's like a psychological like disparity from reality, then I'll hand it off. But the kind of line I draw, is it perception and maladaptive training having to do with perception, or do you have some wires that are crossed? So like maybe, one of the athletes I was working with who recently had a lot of success, everyone was telling him his whole life he had anxiety. You have anxiety, you're anxious, you're anxious. Why are you so anxious? You need to see a doctor and get anxiety stuff. And when we dove into it, I was like, you don't have an ounce of anxiety in your body. In fact, you just have a fear-based response to something that's happening. And he's like, really? No one's ever told me that before, blah, blah, blah. We started approaching it as a fear-based response. All of his anxiety disappeared. His heart rate even went down like 12 beats.
How do you identify that as being different than anxiety?
So when I made that line about like dysregulated neurochemistry versus reality, it would mean that you have anxiety in scenarios that don't beget anxiety, and you have anxiety in response to things that you wouldn't need anxiety to be successful for. So like, let's say you were about to have like the biggest phone call of your life and you were anxious. It's like, you don't have anxiety, bro. You care, Or let's say someone tells you have diagnosed anxiety, but you wake up in the morning, you're fine. You go to home and you're fine. You're on the drive home, you're fine. But something happens and it triggers your anxiety. Maybe it's an anxiety trigger, but more likely it's a fear-based response. And then all of a sudden you look at it that way and you're like, shit, maybe you're right. Because I was like, dude, like, I like to spend a full day minimum with my athletes when we start. It's like, I'm going to, not really intrude in your life, but I'm going to live in with you for a day or two.
Yeah.
We're going to do everything together. We're going to the supermarket, not everything. Like, you can go to bed with your wife. I'll be down here. You know what I mean? But we're just going to like live athlete life together for a day or two. And I was with him. I'm like, dude, you don't have a shred threat of anxiety. Like, you've been fine all day, like all this stuff. In fact, people were looking at your side effects and just labeling you as anxious, but no one sat down with you long enough to just talk and learn who you were and be like, you don't have anxiety, you have a fear-based response to X.
I do wonder with that, like how many people are in that type of boat, because anxiety seems to be something that a lot of, especially younger people and younger athletes, it's something that's thrown around a lot, you know, and it's not, I'm not saying people don't have it, but I just wonder how many people are probably in that same boat. And that makes me wonder if somebody that is listening and let's say that they've been told they have anxiety or anxiety disorders, what maybe could they pay attention to when it comes to their responses to question that?
Is this a logical opportunity for anxiety? If you're at the supermarket and it's empty and like there's nothing going on and you just picked up your favorite food and you're anxious, you know, outside of maybe something bad happened the day before, you know, outside of acute variables, too much caffeine, whatever, it's just truly there's no reason for having the anxiety and you have it, then you may be looking at a problem. But if you have even an inkling of reasoning for something in your life, whatever, and you have the response, you can't say someone has a problem.
Okay.
Andrew, anything over there?
I'm sure you get a lot of like, I mean, I'm assuming, sorry, random text from some athletes where you might be like, dude, you probably should be texting a doctor, not me. But I'm just curious, like, what was the most interesting thing that like an athlete has asked you about? I'm thinking, I don't know, like the glutathione thing for the C word thing. Like anything stand out like that to where you're like, huh, let's figure this out.
Only funny things are coming to mind at the moment.
That's even better.
I've been asked if Brussels sprouts were a green vegetable, in which my response was, "Are you colorblind?" And he said, "No." And I was like, "Yes, they are a green vegetable." I've had someone call me and tell me, like, "Andy, I've had these stomach issues for so long, and I was eating white rice, and I switched to potatoes today, and I feel incredible." And I was like, "Oh my God, yeah, fuck white rice, dude." And like the conversation was over. Obviously, it's this literally almost as similar as you can get from a carbohydrate scenario, but it was real to him. So I was like, "Yeah, dude, white rice is bullshit." Potatoes. I get a lot of those. You know, I'm lucky in the sense that I haven't had any. Actually, no, in Mexico. He wasn't my athlete, but one of the caddies for one of the players was actually going into AFib, and he was sitting down and he had this issue before, and I'll never forget it because I was like, wow, if I didn't happen to be here, what would have happened? Because the like residing EMT or whatever he was, like doctor like, in the Mexican clubhouse pulls out a stethoscope on this guy, and I was like, stethoscope? Bro, it's 2023 and all you pulled out was a stethoscope, and this guy's clearly a heart attack risk. So I like run to my locker. I'm a super nerd, obviously. So I always travel with a pulse oximeter and a glucometer everywhere just in case. So I took his blood glucose, took his heart rate, left it on for a couple seconds. The guy like looked at me, he goes, "Oh, you have one of those?" I was like, "Of course I have one of these, bro. It cost me $30 for both of these total." Put it on. It turned out he was an AFib. So I was like, dude, get the fuck out of here, really. Like, no offense, but get the hell out of here. Like, this is a hospital-driven issue. His heart rate was going from like 73 to 183 like over the course of minutes. So that's one of those things where it's like, dude, get the fuck out. Like, just go. Like, you are putting our whole organization at risk by being in here right now. I don't like no like not that this is bad. Like, I don't care if you potentially die on the way to the hospital, but you need to get out of here.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Last thing I have is just to shout out and thank Saquon for winning my fantasy football league for me. It was amazing is that like the whole first half before like the Giants kind of got their shit together, he was literally like their only option, and every defense knew exactly where the ball was going to go every single play, and he still smoked people. It's fucking incredible. Dude, that guy's so damn good. That's all I had to say. I had to get it on wax. So
Sports are awesome, dude. Like,
yeah.
Like, I come to that conclusion all the time where I'm like out there, I'm like, whoa, that's nuts. I'm like, dude, sports are just cool. Like, there's a reason. Like this podcast is about sports. You know what I mean? Like, sure, we all talk about performance, biology, the mind, but like we're ultimately talking about getting better at some type of activity. Like, sports are just so cool.
Yeah, man.
Take us on out of here, Andrew.
All righty. Thank you, everybody, for checking out this episode. Tons of stuff to talk about, so please let us know what some of your favorite topics were on this podcast down below in the comment section. Hit that like button and subscribe. Follow the podcast at MB Power Project all over the place. My Instagram is at I am Andrew Z. Nsima, where you at?
Discord's down below at Nsima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube, and Nsima Inyang on TikTok and Twitter. And the last podcast we did with Andy is over here, so it's going to be somewhere. So go check it out. Andy, where can people find you?
GoSuperbrain@gmail.com is the email I use with my personal assistant. So you'll actually get a response. If you reach out via Instagram, it's not going to be me that responds. I have a lot of other stuff going on, but GoSuperbrain@gmail.com. GoSuperbrain on Instagram is the best way to find me.
I'm at Mark Smelly Bell. Strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.